Welcome to Cozy Fantasy Studio, where gentle magic and sleep stories begin. Tonight, we wander through the world's oldest and famous legends, tales of heroes and stars, of voyages and dreams. So, find a soft place to rest. Let your breath slow and your mind drift like a quiet tide. The night is deep, the fire is warm, and the epic tales are waiting. The Odyssey, Part 1, The Wine-Dark Departure. The sea was still that evening, heavy with salt and song. On the shore of Ithaca, small waves folded over the stones, each one whispering a farewell. Odysseus stood beside his ship, his hand resting on the worn wood of the hull, feeling the slow pulse of the tide beneath it. The sails were furled and pale in the moonlight, like wings waiting to open. Around him, the murmurs of his crew mingled with the steady rhythm of the surf. He had known the sea all his life, yet it always felt new, vast and unknowable. A living sky turned downward. The air smelled of cedar and brine. A lamp swung at the prow, spilling a soft amber light across the deck, where ropes coiled like sleeping serpents. Somewhere behind him, from the hilltop, came the faint rustle of olive leaves and the lowing of cattle in the dusk. Penelope's loom was still at work in the palace, thread sliding through thread, her patience woven into silence. Odysseus imagined the gentle scrape of the shuttle, the dim firelight against the walls, and the quiet figure who refused to yield to despair. Every sound in that imagined room felt like a heartbeat calling him back, even before he had left. But the wind had turned, and with it came destiny, soft yet certain, like the hush before dawn. The gods were restless again. He looked to the horizon where the stars gathered, scattered silver across a sea. The poets had named wine dark. The phrase had always felt right to him. The water shimmered with both beauty and danger, like a dream too rich to be trusted. Somewhere beyond that glittering edge lay Troy, and the long road back again. He breathed deeply, tasting the salt. "Tomorrow," he said to the helmsman, "we leave with the first wind." The man nodded, his eyes reflecting the lamplight. No cheer followed the order, only calm resolve, a hush that carried its own kind of courage. The crew dispersed quietly to their rest, each man folding himself into the rhythm of the night. Odysseus remained by the shore. He knelt, pressing his palm to the cold pebbles. "Keeper of waves," he murmured, "let me go where I must, and bring me home when I am ready." It was not a prayer of command, but of conversation, a sailor speaking to his oldest companion. The wind sighed through the rigging in reply. When dawn came, it came softly, the color of honey and pearl. The first light spilled across the sea, turning its surface into glass. The men rose without words. They ate a simple meal of bread and figs, the air still cool from the night. The world seemed to hold its breath as they pushed the ship into the shallows. The hull groaned, then slid free, meeting the tide like a returning thought. Odysseus climbed aboard last. He felt the wood beneath his feet, the gentle sway of the vessel, as if testing his balance, and smiled faintly. The oars dipped in unison, cutting smooth trails of silver across the water. Behind them, Ithaca grew small, the olive trees becoming smudges of green against the cliffs. For a long time, no one spoke. The rhythm of the oars filled the silence. Pull, breathe, release. Seabirds followed them for a while, their cries high and thin, until the island faded and even the birds turned back. Odysseus stood at the prow, cloak fluttering against the morning breeze. He watched the horizon, not for danger but for distance. The unknown did not frighten him. It was the shape of his life, the dream that refused to end. He thought of his son Telemachus, still young and learning the art of patience. He thought of the gods, who watched mortals as a storyteller watches a flame. As the sun climbed higher, the sea deepened to its true color, dark wine and gold, a living mirror. Dolphins broke the surface now and then, as if welcoming them to the wide road of Poseidon. The scent of salt grew stronger, sharper, cleansing the mind of everything but the moment. By noon, they had reached open waters. The wind filled the sails, and the ship leaned joyfully into its course. The creak of timber and the hum of the ropes became a song. Odysseus felt the familiar ache of leaving, that mingling of freedom and loss that only travelers know. He had left home before, but this time the silence behind him felt heavier, woven with love and the quiet fear that not all journeys end in return. Still, there was peace in the motion. The sea accepted them as it always had, without promise, without malice. The world expanded around them, limitless and calm. As the day waned, clouds gathered in gentle folds. The light turned amber, then rose, then the blue of twilight wine. The sailors set the anchor and lit a small lamp at the center of the deck. Its flame swayed with the breath of the sea, and the men drew closer to its glow. They shared stories in low voices, not of battles or beasts, but of orchards, sisters, and the smell of home after rain. Odysseus listened and smiled. He had learned that every man carries his own Ithaca within him, a place that waits patiently behind the eyes. Perhaps the gods envied mortals that gift, the power to long for something beyond eternity. Above them, the stars thickened. The constellations of their ancestors emerged, Orion striding, the Pleiades glittering like a scatter of seeds. He traced them with his gaze, old friends that had guided sailors since the first ship touched water. Somewhere far ahead, unseen, other shores waited, places where myth and memory blurred. The sea rocked the ship in slow, even rhythm. One by one, the voices faded. The helmsman leaned against the tiller, his eyes half closed. The lamp flickered, and the scent of oil mingled with salt and night. Odysseus lingered a while longer at the prow. The horizon was now only a line of silver breath. He thought of home once more, but the ache had softened into something tender, like the aftertaste of a song. When he finally lay down among his men, the waves murmured against the hull, steady as a heartbeat. Somewhere deep beneath, whales called to one another, low, mournful notes that seemed older than words. Sleep found them easily, folding each man into its quiet tide. The ship drifted on, guided by stars and unseen hands, and the sea, eternal, patient, alive, carried them toward the dreams that awaited beyond dawn. The sea had been kind for many days. It rolled beneath the ship in long, breathing swells, gentle enough that the men's sleep was deep and dreamless. Morning came as a pale shimmer across the horizon. The air smelled faintly of honey and salt, and the ropes were damp with dew. Odysseus rose first, as he often did, and stood at the prow watching the line between sky and water. In that soft hour before dawn, the world felt endless and forgiving. The sound of the oars dipped faintly behind him, rhythmic, steady, almost meditative. Each pull of the wood against the water was a heartbeat, and the sea replied with its slow exhale. By mid-morning, a mist began to gather. It came from nowhere, rolling low over the waves until it swallowed the ship in silver. The men spoke quietly, their words swallowed by the hush. Only the creak of the mast remained, and the drip of water falling from the oars. Odysseus peered into the fog. "There is land nearby," he said softly. "I can feel it." The helmsman nodded. He had felt it too. The subtle shift of the current, the way the wind carried the scent of soil and flowers, faint but undeniable. The mist thinned like gauze, and slowly an island appeared ahead, green hills rising from the sea, cliffs carved smooth by time, and trees so tall they seemed to drink the clouds. The air grew warm and fragrant. Somewhere a bird called, its cry both strange and welcoming. The men murmured in relief. After so many nights upon the open sea, any shore was a comfort. They steered toward a small bay where the water turned to turquoise and the sand shone like powdered pearl. The ship glided gently into the shallows. When the keel brushed the sand, Odysseus stepped down first. The sand was warm beneath his feet. The breeze carried scents he had not known since Ithaca, thyme, figs, and sun-warmed grass. He turned to his men with a calm smile. "We will rest here," he said. "The sea has carried us far. Let us listen to the earth for a while." They built no fire, for the air itself felt bright and alive. Some of the crew wandered among the trees, where the leaves shimmered with dew that tasted faintly sweet. Others lay on the beach, letting the warmth sink into their bones. Odysseus walked inland, following a path marked by small white stones. He soon came upon a meadow. In its center, a spring bubbled quietly from the roots of an oak, spilling into a clear pool. The surface reflected the sky like glass, broken only by the fall of a single golden leaf. He knelt and drank, and the water was cool and strange. Not quite sweet, not quite fresh, but full of something ancient. As he drank, he heard a voice, soft, melodic, almost like wind through a harp string. "Traveler of the endless sea," it said, "why do you seek what you already carry?" Odysseus looked up. At the edge of the pool stood a woman, her hair dark as the sea before a storm, her eyes the color of moonlight on stone. She wore no crown, yet her presence bent the air around her, as if even the wind waited to hear her speak. "I seek only safe passage," Odysseus said quietly. "My men and I have wandered far, and the sea is not yet finished with us." The woman smiled faintly. "No sea is ever finished," she said. "It dreams through you as you dream through it." Her gaze softened. "You are weary, Odysseus of Ithaca. Rest here. The waters will forget your name if you let them." The offer hung in the air like the scent of fruit in summer. Tempting, sweet, unreal. For a moment he felt the ache of his years upon him, the long weight of choices and storms. He imagined letting go, sleeping beneath these trees until time itself moved on. But then the image of Penelope's loom returned, the steady rhythm of thread and patience. He shook his head. "I cannot," he said. "Even if the sea forgets me, there is one who will not." The woman's smile deepened, half sorrow, half admiration. "Then go, wanderer," she said, "but take with you the gift of stillness. You will need it when the storm returns." When Odysseus returned to the beach, the men were gathered around small piles of fruit they had found among the trees, figs, oranges, and berries that glowed faintly in the light. They ate and laughed softly, their faces easy for the first time in weeks. The island seemed to hum with gentle energy, as if it had been waiting for them. They stayed through the afternoon. The sky shifted from blue to rose to gold. Some of the men slept, their dreams peaceful and deep. Others sang in low voices, the sound mingling with the rustle of leaves. Odysseus walked the shore again, his feet tracing patterns in the sand. Each wave erased his steps almost as soon as he made them. By twilight, he knew it was time to leave. "The sea is calling again," he said. The men did not argue. They gathered what they could carry: water from the spring, a few fruits, a handful of sand for luck, and returned to the ship. As they pushed from shore, the island seemed to watch them go. Mist rose once more, curling like smoke along the water. The woman's voice drifted faintly through it. Not words this time, only a hum that sounded like the earth dreaming. The ship slipped into the open sea again, the sail catching the last breath of daylight. The men watched as the island dissolved behind them, until only stars remained. Night fell soft and deep. The waves rocked the vessel in slow rhythm, and the air smelled of rain far away. The crew settled to their rest, each one drifting into dreams shaped by the island's calm. Odysseus stood alone at the stern, his hand on the tiller. The gift of stillness lingered in him like a quiet flame. The stars above were bright and near, the sea dark and endless, yet neither seemed hostile now. They were simply vast, like thought, like memory. He closed his eyes and listened. Somewhere within the hush of the night, he thought he heard the faintest echo of that voice again, a whisper reminding him that not all havens are meant for staying. The wind shifted, warm and steady. The ship turned toward the horizon, guided by instinct and fate alike. And as Odysseus looked ahead into the starlit distance, the world itself seemed to breathe with him, a single, endless rhythm of departure and return. For many nights, the sea had been a mirror of stars. The men rowed by starlight, their oars dipping soundlessly into the calm, dark water. Even the sea seemed to whisper more softly, as if it too had grown weary of storms. They had crossed islands where voices sang in the air and winds told riddles, yet none of those places clung to their dreams the way Ithaca did. Home was no longer just a shore. It had become a promise, a direction that pulsed like a heartbeat in every sailor's chest. Odysseus stood beneath the mast, wrapped in his cloak of rough wool. His eyes were steady on the horizon, though the night hid everything beyond reach. The stars traced their silent maps above him, Orion to the west, the Great Bear circling to the north, and by their light he steered. "Do you ever tire of the sea?" the helmsman asked quietly. Odysseus smiled faintly. "No one tires of what teaches him," he said. "The sea reminds me that I am never the master, only the guest." The helmsman nodded, his gaze lost in the faint shimmer of the waves. "And will it let us go, do you think?" "That is for the sea to decide," Odysseus murmured, though in his heart he felt the current already changing. The water had a different scent tonight, faintly of grass and soil, of land still unseen. Somewhere ahead, Ithaca waited like a dream returning to itself. At dawn, clouds opened and sunlight spilled over the water like honey. The men awoke to the soft cry of gulls and the gleam of distant hills. Their voices rose in disbelief, then in joy. A shoreline shimmered in the morning haze, low cliffs, olive trees, and smoke rising from a far-off hearth. Odysseus said nothing. His throat tightened as he watched the island grow clearer with each stroke of the oars. It was as he remembered, the slopes draped in green, the scent of thyme floating from unseen meadows, the glint of white houses clinging to the hills. Yet everything felt smaller now, as if time had folded it gently inward while he was away. They anchored in a quiet cove sheltered by rocks. The air was still, heavy with the perfume of flowering shrubs and wet earth. The men leapt into the shallows, their laughter breaking the long hush that had followed them across the sea. Odysseus stepped onto the sand last, his feet sinking into the shore he had dreamed of through 10 endless years. He did not rush toward the village. Instead, he knelt and touched the ground. The soil was cool and alive. He pressed his palm against it, and in that simple gesture felt the weight of everything. The storms survived, the temptations resisted, the long silence of waiting hearts. "Ithaca," he whispered, "you are smaller than the sea, but greater than my memory." A breeze stirred the leaves, almost like an answer. The men built a small fire beside the rocks, roasting fish caught from the morning tide. The smoke drifted upward, pale and slow. Odysseus ate little. His mind wandered to the halls of his home. The carved beams, the loom's patient rhythm, the way Penelope's voice had always sounded like water against stone. He imagined her at that very hour, sitting beside the hearth, perhaps glancing toward the door, though no messenger had yet come. He wished he could tell her that he had seen gods and monsters, and yet nothing as powerful as her quiet faith. When the meal was done, the men rested on the sand. Odysseus walked along the edge of the cove. Each wave seemed to breathe his name, and then erase it again. He met an old shepherd, tending a small flock of goats among the rocks. The man looked up in surprise at the stranger before him. "You've come from far off," the shepherd said. his voice calm as the sea itself. Odysseus nodded. "From farther than I meant to." The shepherd smiled. "Then you found what most never do, the long way home." The words settled over him like a blessing. That night, they lit another fire. The stars shone so brightly that the flames seemed pale by comparison. The men spoke quietly of their hopes, of families, of gardens, of rest. One by one, they fell asleep beside the embers. Odysseus sat apart, listening to the night sounds, the chirp of crickets, the low sigh of waves against the shore. He took out a small lyre, its wood polished by age and travel. It had survived storms, enchantments, and the loneliness of distant islands. He touched the strings gently, and the first note trembled in the air like the wing of a bird. The melody was simple, shaped by longing and memory. He played softly, not to be heard but to remember. Each note carried a memory, the laughter of his men on bright mornings, the cry of gulls over Troy, the hum of the island where time itself had tried to lull him to sleep, and beneath it all, the pulse of the sea, eternal and kind. The song drifted outward across the cove. The waves caught it, repeating it in whispers. The stars seemed to listen. It was not a song of triumph or sorrow, but of return, the sound of a journey folding back upon itself. When the last note faded, the night seemed deeper, fuller. Odysseus looked toward the hills. Somewhere beyond them, his home waited, a light still burning. He felt no need to rush there. The moment itself was enough. The nearness of the shore, the steady breath of his companions, the peace of a story coming full circle. He set the lyre down and closed his eyes. The sounds of the island wrapped around him like a blanket, wind in the trees, waves against the stones, the faint hiss of embers. For the first time in years, his heart was quiet, not empty, not restless, just still. Before dawn, he woke to a silence so complete it felt sacred. The sea was flat and glassy, reflecting the first faint light of morning. He rose and stood at the water's edge. The ship rested beside him, its sail lowered, its ropes slack. He ran his hand along the wood and smiled. The journey was over, but the sea would go on forever. He looked to the horizon one last time. Somewhere out there, other wanderers would set sail, guided by stars and longing. He hoped they too would learn what he had, that the world is wide, but peace is found in the smallest of harbors. As the sun rose over Ithaca, the first birds stirred in the trees. The waves lapped gently at his feet, a farewell that was also a welcome. Odysseus turned toward home. The sea behind him shimmered, endless and serene, no longer a test but a memory singing softly in the light. Night settled early over the northern lands. The sky was a deep blue flame, slow burning behind the pines. Frost gleamed on the grass, and the breath of the mead hall rose like smoke into the cold air. Inside, laughter and song wove through the rafters, a warmth made of voices, gold light and shared memory. Hirot, they called it, the heart of the Geats, the hall of stories. Every beam smelled of oak and fire. Every corner echoed with old songs of kinship and the sea. The great hearth at its center burned like a sun, casting steady light across shields, cloaks, and smiling faces. Men sat close together, their cups brimming with mead, their words rich with the rhythm of belonging. At the high seat sat King Hrothgar, silver-haired and still broad of shoulder. His eyes, though soft with age, held the same glow as the flames before him. He raised his cup. "To peace," he said, his voice carrying through the hall, "to nights without fear, to songs unbroken." The hall cheered. The sound was joyous and thunderous, echoing outward until it faded beyond the hills. Yet when the last of the laughter softened, a quiet lingered, the kind that follows too much joy when the night itself listens. Outside the walls, The marshes stretched black and endless. Somewhere beyond them, wind moved through reeds with a sound like sighing. For years now, something had stirred in those wetlands, something that envied light. The warriors did not name it. Instead, they spoke louder, sang longer, and drank deeper. Among them that night sat a traveller, newly arrived, broad-backed, dark-haired, his eyes calm and thoughtful. He listened more than he spoke. When others roared their tales, he smiled quietly and looked into the fire as though he could read the future in its shape. This was Beowulf, a hero still young, but already known across the sea. His voice was low, and his presence filled the space around him. Not by boast, but by stillness. He had come from Gutland, upon hearing of Hrothgar's plight, of the creature that crept from the fens to haunt the hall by night. But tonight, no one spoke of monsters. There would be time for that when the shadows deepened. For now, there was song. A bard stood near the hearth and struck his harp. The notes rose like sparks. He sang of ancient kings, of ships carved from whalebone and sails dyed with crushed berries. His song drifted through the smoky air, weaving around the pillars and settling softly on the hearts of those who listened. Beowulf closed his eyes. The music reminded him of home, the roar of wind over cliffs, the salt against his skin, the laughter of his own hearth long before this journey. For a moment, he felt no weight of destiny, no task waiting in the dark, only warmth, fellowship and sound. The bard's voice slowed. He sang of a hall blessed by peace, and of a darkness that envied it. He sang of jealousy older than time, of loneliness turned to rage. His final note hung trembling in the air, then vanished into silence. The hall was very still. Outside, the wind shifted. A single torch at the door flickered. The sea's breath carried the smell of iron and frost. Beowulf rose quietly, stepping away from the table. He walked toward the great doorway and stood beneath its carved lintel. Beyond, the night was vast, black water gleaming under thin stars, the low cry of owls echoing across the moor. Heorot's light spilled out onto the snow, forming a golden path that ended just short of the dark. Somewhere past that boundary, unseen eyes watched. He felt it, the weight of something ancient, neither beast nor man but both, drawn by the warmth it could never share. He turned back inside. The men were settling to sleep on benches near the fire, their laughter fading to murmurs. Shields rested against the walls, spears glinting faintly in the firelight. The smell of mead and pine smoke filled the air. Beowulf found a place near the door and sat cross-legged on the floor. He unsheathed his blade, its edge catching the light like a whisper of dawn, and laid it beside him. He would not sleep deeply tonight. The hours passed. The fire dimmed to embers, the songs to dreams. The wind pressed gently against the walls, curious and cold. Beowulf's eyes stayed half open, reflecting the faint red of the coals. He listened, not for words but for changes, the pause between breaths, the shift of weight in the beams, the sigh of the hearth. Every hero learns that silence can speak as clearly as any tongue. And then he heard it, not loud but certain, the sound of something vast moving through water. A slow drag, a hiss, then stillness again. The air in the hall seemed to tighten. Even the sleepers stirred. Beowulf's hand found his sword's hilt. But before any sound of approach could grow clearer, the noise stopped. Only the night replied, calm and empty once more. The monster, if it had been there, had returned to its depths. Heorot slept on. When dawn came, pale and cold, Beowulf stepped outside. The frost had returned, spreading thinly across the grass. The world smelled of wood smoke and dew. He watched the river beyond the fields, its surface calm, unbroken. The The reeds swayed gently, gold in the morning light. For a moment it was hard to imagine any darkness hidden there. Behind him, the hall came alive again. Voices calling, cups clattering, laughter rising to meet the day. The fear of night seemed a dream already fading. Hrothgar approached, his breath forming clouds in the chill air. "You keep watch when others sleep," the old king said kindly. "A good sign in any man." Beowulf bowed his head. The night was quiet, he said, but not empty. Hrothgar's eyes darkened, though his smile did not fade. "You speak true," he murmured. "The marsh remembers, even when the hall forgets." The king turned back toward the warmth of the fire, and Beowulf followed. Behind them, the sun rose over the hills, casting long light into the dark places of the land. For now, the Hall of Echoes stood strong. Its laughter returned, its fires steady, yet beneath that comfort, a current stirred, waiting. And as the day unfolded in peace, the shadow beyond the moor began to move once more. Evening came slowly to Heorot, as if the sun itself hesitated to leave. The air outside was cold enough to sting the lungs, but inside the hall, warmth still glowed in every corner. The warriors sat shoulder to shoulder, their laughter carrying above the hum of harp strings. They had hunted that morning, feasted at noon, and now the mead passed again from hand to hand, bright as liquid amber. Beowulf sat near the fire, quiet as before. His eyes followed the flames while his thoughts wandered far beyond them. The sound of merriment soothed him, but beneath it he heard another rhythm, the slow pulse of the earth, the faint rush of the river that ran beyond the moor. It whispered of something restless, something waiting. At the high seat, King Hrothgar rose. "Tonight," he declared, "we sing of the courage that keeps this hall alive. Fear has no hold here, not while friends keep watch." His words stirred cheer, yet somewhere behind that cheer moved unease. Many there had lost kin in the dark. Though they toasted hope, memory lingered like smoke. The bard began to sing, his harp rising over the sound of the fire. The tale was old, a song of creation, of how light first broke through mist and water to form the earth. His voice was low and steady, a comfort against the gathering cold. Outside, that very song drifted through the night. It crossed the river, reached the marshlands, and trembled through the reeds. Something heard it. Far below the surface of the moor, water pooled in black caverns where no light could live. In that silence, the sound of human joy was a wound. The creature stirred, ancient and solitary, not made for hatred, but shaped by it through endless exile. It remembered warmth once, and music. Now it knew only hunger for what had been lost. The song above turned into laughter, and the laughter broke whatever peace the creature had known. It rose from the mire like a thought that will not be forgotten. Mud streamed from its limbs, and the water closed behind it. Up on the slope, mist thickened. The torches by Herod's gate flickered. Inside, the harp still played. Beowulf lifted his head. The sound he had heard the night before returned, faint but certain, a slow dragging against stone, a weight that did not belong. He stood, one motion fluid as breath, and reached for his sword. The steel whispered as it left its sheath. "Be still," he said softly. The men near him fell silent, cups halfway to their lips. A gust of cold wind burst through the doorway. The fire hissed. The torches bent as though bowing to something unseen. Then the great door shuddered. It did not break, only groaned under a force that tested its strength. A shadow passed across the threshold, vast yet shapeless, like smoke with a heartbeat. The warriors froze. None spoke, though fear burned behind their eyes. Beowulf stepped forward. "You have come far," he said, voice calm as winter water, "but you will not take our peace tonight." No answer came, only a low sound, half growl, half sorrow. The door trembled again, then stilled. Footsteps, or perhaps ripples, retreated into the night. For a long while nothing moved. When morning broke, frost lay heavy upon the ground. Tracks marked the earth outside the gate, deep impressions that filled quickly with water, as if the land itself tried to forget them. Beowulf examined them in silence. They led toward the marsh, winding through the heather and disappearing into mist. He touched one print with his hand. The soil there was warm still, as though the darkness carried its own heat. Hrothgar joined him. "So it returns," the king said softly. "Always it returns." Beowulf looked toward the moor. The reeds swayed in a slow rhythm, as if breathing. "Then tonight," he said, "let it come again. This time it will find me waiting." That day passed in uneasy quiet. The hall stood bright beneath the pale sun, its roof glistening with frost that melted and refroze. The warriors spoke little. They repaired shields, tightened straps, and sharpened blades more for comfort than need. By dusk, Beowulf called them together. "Sing," he said simply. "Fill the air with life. The dark hates song, and we will give it no silence to hide in." So they sang, softly at first, then stronger. Their voices rose with the smoke curling toward the rafters, each note carrying warmth into the approaching night. When the last verse faded, Beowulf took his place by the doorway once more. The others lay near the hearth, swords within reach but eyes closing. Outside, the wind began to rise, carrying the scent of rain and peat. The moon appeared, large and pale, casting a path of light across the river. In that reflection, something moved. The creature came again, silent as thought. Its body barely broke the surface as it crossed the water. Every step sent ripples sliding toward the shore. It paused at the edge of the field, listening, the hall's glow pulsing in the distance, the faint hum of human breath within. Loneliness gnawed deeper than hunger. It remembered dimly, once belonging to that warmth, once hearing stories and laughter not meant to wound. But time had turned memory to bitterness. With a cry like wind through stone, it surged forward. Inside, Beowulf was already awake. He rose before the door shook, before the torches bent. In his stillness there was no fear, only recognition. Two exiles about to meet. He lifted his hand, signaling silence. The warriors froze where they lay, their hearts pounding in rhythm with the rain beginning to fall. The door crashed inward. The air filled with cold and the smell of the deep earth. The shadow filled the threshold, enormous and strange, dripping with the color of night. The light of the hearth caught its eyes, not wicked, but wild and lost. Beowulf stepped forward into that gaze. He did not lift his sword yet. Instead, he spoke quietly, the words more offering than threat. "We are both weary of this," he said. "You seek the fire, and we guard it. But perhaps there is another way." The creature's breath came ragged, like wind over reeds. For a moment, it hesitated. The rain slowed outside. Then the world held its breath. Beowulf waited, still as the stones beneath his feet. The fire cracked softly, casting red across his face and the creature's shifting form. What happened next no one would ever agree upon. Some said he struck first, others swore he laid down his sword, and the darkness folded inward, swallowed by its own grief. But all agreed. The hall trembled, once, twice, and then the night grew calm. When dawn returned, the air smelled of rain and pine. Heorot's torches burned again, their flames steady and bright. No sign of the creature remained, only the deep quiet that follows a long sigh. Beowulf stood outside, watching mist rise from the marsh. The reeds glistened with dew. The water lay smooth as polished stone. He did not call it victory. He only whispered, "Rest now, whoever you were." Behind him, Hrothgar's people began to stir, their voices cautious but hopeful. The hall would sing again, perhaps louder than before, and as sunlight crept across the fields, the shadow beneath the mead hall sank back into legend. A story retold in gentle tones beside the fire, of a night when courage and compassion met halfway across the dark. The years unfolded like quiet waves along a distant shore. Retold's fires burned for many winters after the night of the shadow. The songs of peace returned to the rafters, and the hall once more filled with warmth, laughter, and the clatter of cups. The tale of Beowulf spread far beyond those northern hills. Sailors carried it across the sea, and kings spoke his name beside their hearths. Yet Beowulf himself did not stay. When the meadows turned green again, and the wind began to smell of salt and rain, he felt the pull of the sea upon him once more. He departed at dawn. The water lay calm as polished glass, the air trembling with light. His companions helped push the ship into the tide, their boots sinking into the wet sand. The vessel, long and slender, seemed to recognize him. The wood groaned softly, remembering old journeys. The ropes creaked, the sail fluttered like a sigh, and soon they were gliding beyond the breakers. Beowulf stood at the prow, the spray touching his face. He had known many seas, but this one seemed softer, less a challenge than a conversation. The gulls followed for a while, their cries sharp in the morning air, then turned back toward the cliffs. As the shore faded behind him, he felt no sorrow, only the calm of one who carries his home within. For days they sailed north, following the sun as it dipped lower each evening. The sky stretched wide and pale, and the nights were long with silver light. The sea smelled of iron and mist. The waves rolled like breathing giants, steady and slow. The men spoke little, content in the rhythm of wind and water. Each creak of the ship became part of a lullaby that soothed their hearts. At times Beowulf would sit by the mast and run his fingers along the carved wood of his sword's hilt. He thought not of battles but of the silence that follows them, the hush after victory, when even the air seems to bow in respect. He remembered the eyes of the creature beneath the hall, not evil, only lost. He wondered if all things that seek warmth must, in the end, find peace in their own kind of light. One evening, as the horizon dimmed to violet, they came upon a lonely island. It was small, covered in grass that shimmered with dew, and ringed by stones shaped like old sentinels. The men anchored the ship and went ashore. The air was cool and still, and the only sound was the whisper of waves touching rock. Beowulf climbed the low ridge and looked out upon the endless sea. The sky was vast above him, the first stars kindling like slow sparks. In that quiet, he felt time loosen its hold. He sat upon a stone and closed his eyes. The scent of salt and moss surrounded him, and the memory of every journey he had ever taken rose like mist. The faces of his friends, his kings, his battles, all passed before him like reflections on water. He knew he was nearing his final voyage, though no fear stirred in him. Life had been long, and the world generous. He had fought where he must, and spared when he could. Now he sought not glory but rest. That night, a fire was built beside the shore. The flames swayed gently in the wind, their light painting gold across the faces of the crew. The men spoke of home, of wives and children, of harvests waiting beyond the sea. Beowulf listened, smiling faintly. He had no heirs of his own, yet he felt their words settle in his heart as if they were part of him. The sea, after all, remembers every voice that ever crossed it. When the fire burned low, he rose and walked to the edge of the tide. The moon floated above the water, full and pale, its reflection trembling with every ripple. He thought of the hall of Heorot, of laughter echoing through its beams, of the kindness in Hrothgar's eyes, and the songs that would outlive them all. He knelt and touched the water. It was cold, yet welcoming. He whispered to the sea, "Carry me gently, old friend. The world is yours now." The next morning, the wind changed. A soft breeze came from the east, bringing with it the scent of pine and snow. Beowulf ordered the sail raised. The men obeyed. Though they spoke little, they sensed the stillness in their captain, the deep peace that comes before parting. The ship moved smoothly into open water, its wake gleaming under the rising sun. For many hours, no one spoke. The horizon stretched endless, the color of polished steel. Beowulf stood tall beside the mast, his cloak rippling around him. He looked not forward or back, but into the sky, as though reading a message written there. The sea rolled beneath him, patient and eternal. By afternoon, clouds gathered, thin and white. The men saw dolphins leap near the bow, their movements playful and bright. Beowulf smiled. "Even the sea sings," he said. "It sings of what was and what will be." As night fell, he called his men together. "When I am gone," he told them softly, "do not mourn me as a man lost. Think of me as a wave returning to the tide. Everything I am was given by the sea and by your friendship. Let that be enough." They bowed their heads, the firelight from the ship's lamp trembling across their faces. The stars emerged one by one, scattered like seeds across the dark. Hours later, when all had gone to sleep, Beowulf remained awake. He sat upon the deck, the sea whispering below, and felt the world around him blur into quiet. He closed his eyes. The sound of waves became a heartbeat, the salt air a lullaby. When dawn came, the men found him at peace, his face calm as driftwood, his hands folded upon his chest. The wind was gentle, the water smooth as silk. They built a pyre upon the deck and wrapped him in his cloak. The flames rose bright and pure, their smoke curling into the pale sky. The ship drifted slowly away, its sails catching the first light of morning. The men watched until it became a shadow upon the horizon, then a glimmer, then nothing at all. And yet, for many nights after, sailors claimed they saw a light upon the northern sea, a faint glow moving across the water, steady as a heartbeat, warm as a hearth. They said it was Beowulf sailing still, guiding lost ships through the mist. And so the legend grew, that the hero who once defended a hall of fire became, in the end, a keeper of calm, a guardian not of battle, but of peace. The waves went on whispering his name. Before there was time, there was light. It shimmered without beginning or end, a vast and living radiance that filled every space where thought might one day wander. From that light, the first voices rose, notes of harmony so pure that sound itself became devotion. Among those voices was one brighter than the rest, whose song curved like dawn breaking through crystal air. His name was Lucifer, the morning star, and when he sang, the heavens seemed to remember why they were made. He moved among the choirs like a breeze through sunlight. His presence stirred joy, his laughter made the firmament tremble in delight. The stars themselves leaned closer to hear him. Of all who sang, his melody carried furthest, bold and gentle, full of color and grace. He loved the Creator's light with a depth that felt infinite, and in that love he found his purpose. Yet the nature of light is to reflect, and reflection invites wonder. In the stillness between songs, Lucifer sometimes wondered at his own brightness. He saw how the stars mirrored his tone, how their light seemed to answer his, and he began to ask quiet questions that no one else dared to voice. What is the difference between the source and the reflection? Is light less divine when it shines through another? The questions were not rebellion at first. They were curiosity, the same curiosity that shaped worlds and set the spheres into motion. But like water pooling in a hollow stone, the questions lingered and deepened. The more he thought of light, the more he longed to see its full measure, to understand why some radiance was called creation and some was called glory. The Creator heard the questions and did not silence them. Instead, he spoke gently. "You are what I made you to be, my child. Brightness born of brightness, a song born of silence." Lucifer bowed and sang again, but something had shifted. The words comforted him, yet did not quiet the ache. To be born of light is to crave its source. He began to listen differently, to feel the pauses in the music, the spaces between the chords, as if something greater waited beyond the song itself. As the ages turned, he became the first to name beauty, not as worship, but as wonder. He looked upon the galaxies spinning like slow lanterns across the void, and marveled that they existed at all. His song began to change. It grew deeper, more solitary, like the sound of water flowing beneath stars. The other angels listened in awe, but some whispered that his music no longer rose toward the Creator. It circled inward, luminous yet uncertain. One evening that was not evening, when the light softened into gold, Lucifer stood alone at the edge of the firmament. Below him lay creation newly formed, the dust of stars, the first mountains, the gentle turning of seas. He watched clouds gather around an infant world and felt something stir within him, something vast and tender. He knelt and touched the air. It trembled under his hand. In that moment, he understood love as longing, not the desire to possess, but to give endlessly without end. He felt the pulse of every atom, each carrying a fragment of divine warmth, and it filled him with joy so immense that he thought it might undo him. Then came the thought, quiet, almost invisible. If he loved creation so deeply, could he not also guide it? Could he not carry the flame himself, shaping the order of the stars, tending the beauty he adored? He did not wish to replace his maker, only to share in the act of creation. Yet in that wish lay a spark too bright to remain hidden. When he returned to the choirs, his voice was changed. It soared higher than before, filled with emotion so rich it made even the elder seraphs weep. The harmonies wove through all of heaven, radiant and bittersweet. The Creator listened, knowing that every note was both praise and question. "Why must one light rule all others?" the song seemed to say. "If we are made of flame, may we not also shine?" The heavens trembled at the beauty of it. Some angels paused in their singing, unsure whether to join or fall silent. They felt the pull of Lucifer's melody, how it promised freedom and purpose at once. It was not pride that moved him, but yearning, an ache to expand the music beyond its first design. The Creator spoke again, his voice like wind through endless fields of light. "Your brightness is my gift, not your burden. To shine alone is to forget why light exists. It is given so that all may see, not so that one may be seen." Lucifer bowed his head though his heart burned. The Creator's words were truth, yet they left no space for his hunger. He longed not to be worshipped but to understand, to explore the mystery of the light itself, even if it meant falling into shadow to find its depth. The days that followed were quiet. He continued to sing, but his voice drifted to the edges of the choirs, weaving through harmonies like a thread of silver among gold. Some angels still sought him, drawn by his gentleness, his wisdom. They did not see rebellion in him. They saw the first dreamer, the one who dared to ask what love truly meant. And so the morning star began to gather followers, not with promises, but with curiosity. "Listen," he told them, "to the silence between songs. There is meaning there too." Together they sang of the beauty of change, of motion, of light that bends and reshapes itself like water. Their music was soft, never defiant, and yet it carried a new rhythm, the pulse of self-awareness. One evening, as creation turned its first full circle, Lucifer looked once more upon that infant world below. He saw its oceans shimmer like mirrors, reflecting the heavens in ripples of blue and silver. He saw life begin to stir in the shallows, trembling with the breath of possibility. He smiled, not in pride but in awe. "If this is the work of light," he whispered, "then even its shadow must be beautiful." The words echoed faintly, carried on the wind of the spheres. The other angels heard them and did not understand, but the Creator did. And somewhere deep within the boundless glow, the first faint tremor of change began. A new chord added to the eternal song, tender and uncertain, like the hush before dawn. Lucifer lifted his face to the light and sang once more. The heavens shimmered in answer, for now there was still harmony, though beneath it the first question remained, bright, gentle, and unending. What is the shape of love when it chooses its own path? The light of heaven never truly dimmed, yet for the first time it seemed softer, like dawn caught behind a veil. The choir still sang, but the harmony had changed. There was a pause between every note now, a quiet breath where questions lived. Even the air felt different, filled with a fragile expectancy, as if all creation held its breath. Lucifer walked among the golden fields of radiance, his steps leaving trails of light that shimmered briefly before fading. He felt the warmth of the Creator everywhere, but it no longer filled him as before. It was as though the light now reached him through water, beautiful still, but distant. He passed beneath arches woven of flame and crystal. Around him, angels greeted him with reverence and uncertainty. Some smiled, others lowered their eyes. The morning star, once the first voice of joy, had become something they did not know how to name. His song had changed the air itself. It stirred memory and longing in ways that made even the most faithful uneasy. Lucifer did not seek worship, he sought understanding. Yet the more he sought, the lonelier he became. There were no mirrors in heaven, only reflection through love. And now that reflection felt dimmed. He found solace near the edge of creation, where the stars thinned into silence. There, he would stand and look out upon the dark, where unformed worlds waited for light. He began to see beauty in that darkness too, the way it held potential, like soil waiting for seed. Sometimes, others came to him. Among them was Azrael, the quietest of the archangels, whose wings shimmered like the inside of a pearl. "You look upon the dark too long, brother," Azrael said gently one evening. "It was never meant for us." Lucifer smiled faintly. "Then why did he make it?" Azrael hesitated, perhaps so that light would know its worth. "Perhaps," Lucifer murmured, "or perhaps so that something new could be born within it." His eyes lifted to the distant void. Light that never meets shadow cannot understand itself. Azrael watched him, sorrow in his gaze. "You speak as though you are not part of the light." Lucifer turned toward him, his face serene but unreadable. "I am of it," he said softly. "But not only it." After that, Azrael came no more. Lucifer continued to wander the outer edges, where light thinned and the stars hummed softly like sleeping hearts. He began to compose new songs there, melodies woven of wonder and quiet defiance, soft enough not to break the air, but filled with longing. The harmonies were strange and beautiful, and soon other angels came to listen. They found in his music a reflection of their own unspoken thoughts, the desire to explore, to understand the fullness of creation, rather than merely adore it. "Why must the song always rise upward?" one asked. "Why can it not flow outward too?" "Because upward is safer," Lucifer replied, smiling. "But nothing grows in safety alone." And so they sang with him, softly at first, their voices weaving through his like starlight on water. They did not turn from the Creator. They only reached further into the mystery of his work. Yet in heaven, even curiosity has weight. Word of their new harmonies reached the higher choirs, and then the throne. The Creator listened, and sorrow moved through the eternal song. One day, when the air was full of gold and stillness, a call went forth across all of heaven. Every angel, from the smallest flame to the highest seraph, gathered in the great expanse before the light. There was no sun there, only brilliance too vast to name. It filled the senses with warmth and sound, every pulse of it a heartbeat of existence. Lucifer stood among his kind, radiant as ever. The Creator's voice filled the space without sound, soft yet infinite. "My morning star," he said, "you have brought beauty where even I had not thought to look. You have shown that love may question, and that wonder may seek, but the balance trembles. There are those who now follow your light more than mine. They listen for your song before they listen for truth." Lucifer bowed deeply. His wings spread behind him, wide and silver as dawn. "I never asked them to follow," he said quietly. "I only asked them to listen." "To listen is to follow," said the voice, "and to lead them without anchor is to draw them into the storm." Lucifer raised his head. His expression was calm, though sorrow lingered in his eyes. If light cannot question, is it still free? Must love be blind to remain pure? The words echoed, and the choirs shuddered at their courage. Some turned away. Others looked upon him with compassion. The voice answered, tender but unyielding. "Love is not blind, child of morning, but it remembers who lit the stars." The silence that followed was long. Then the light dimmed, just enough for the stars themselves to shimmer. Lucifer saw in their glow the reflection of his own brightness, and for the first time he understood what it meant to stand apart. It was not exile yet, but the shadow of it. He bowed again. "Then let me sing alone until I find the truth that unites the two." And without waiting for permission, he began. His song rose clear, radiant, aching. It spoke of unity and freedom, of creation as a circle rather than a ladder, of a light that bends to embrace even its shadow. The melody was so pure that it filled every corner of heaven. Some angels wept, others trembled. The very air seemed to change color. When it ended, silence fell heavy as snowfall. The Creator's voice came again, gentle and full of grief. "You have given me beauty, beloved one, but at a cost. The harmony cannot hold two centers. You must choose where your song will rest." Lucifer's eyes shone like fire, seen through glass. "Then let it rest where it must," he said, "in the stillness between." And so it was. The choirs withdrew, their voices dimmed. The morning star stood alone at the edge of the light, his wings catching the gold and the shadow both. Around him, heaven shimmered, unchanged, yet somehow different. The music that once bound every heart now carried an echo, soft and strange, of a love too wide for its own boundaries. He looked once more upon the Creator's radiance and whispered, not in defiance but in sorrow, "I will always love you, even from afar." Then he turned toward the dark. The first star flickered beneath his feet, like a lantern guiding him onward. Behind him, heaven shone steady and eternal. Before him stretched the unlit expanse of possibility. He stepped forward, and the light followed him halfway, unwilling to let go. Thus began the dimming of heaven. Not a fall, but a soft descent into understanding. The morning star moved toward shadow, not out of pride, but out of love that could not bear to end. And in his wake, silence bloomed like a second kind of light. The light receded behind him until it became a horizon, faint and trembling like the memory of music. Beyond it stretched the vastness that had no name, an ocean of quiet where even sound seemed to rest. Lucifer drifted through it as one might through water, his wings glowing softly, the last echo of heaven clinging to their edges. There was no falling, only a gentle descent, as if creation itself wished to cradle him rather than cast him out. He did not know how long he moved through that stillness. Time was not yet born where he traveled. Sometimes he thought he heard faint singing behind him. the choirs of his brothers continuing the eternal song. But it came to him as from a great distance, muffled by mercy. He wondered if they mourned him, or simply carried on, their harmonies closing around the space he left. Ahead of him spread darkness, but it was not empty. The dark shimmered faintly, full of potential, the way deep soil hums with life unseen. He sensed warmth within it, like the breath before a word is spoken. He felt no fear. This was what he had sought, the space where light and shadow meet, the silence before creation begins again. He folded his wings and let himself sink deeper. Colors began to emerge, slow, muted tones like the first blush of dawn seen through mist. He realized he was not alone. Other sparks drifted beside him, dim but steady, remnants of stars too small to be named. They circled him gently, drawn to his glow. "Do you know what this place is?" he whispered to them. And though they could not speak, he felt their answer, the waiting place, the breath between worlds. He spread his hands, and from his palms the faintest light unfolded, silver and blue, tender as new flame. It did not burn, it shimmered softly, touching the darkness with reverence. The surrounding void accepted it, neither consuming nor rejecting it. The two mingled, forming a gentle radiance that pulsed like a heartbeat. Lucifer smiled. "So this is what love becomes when it learns to forgive itself," he said quietly. "Not brilliance, but balance." The light deepened. From its rhythm came sound, low at first like wind through unseen fields. He listened, and soon realized the sound came from within him. The song he had begun in heaven continued here, though slower, sadder, shaped by distance and longing. Each note carried both joy and grief, light and shade woven inseparably together. The darkness responded. It trembled, then began to glow in scattered places, as if stars were remembering their birth. He felt warmth surround him, rising from the very void. Where he moved, small fires kindled, soft, living lights that spread outward like seeds upon the wind. He did not command them, they grew of their own will, nourished by the harmony between shadow and flame. He looked upon what he had made, and felt no pride, only peace. Perhaps this, he thought, was what the Creator wished me to find. Yet even as he marveled, sorrow stirred. For all its beauty, the light he carried could not return him home. Heaven's music had moved on without him, and though its memory still lingered in his song, it was now something different, earthly, tender, and mortal in its fragility. Lucifer turned his gaze toward the boundary between heaven and the new space he had shaped. The faint gold of the Creator's realm glimmered far above, steady and pure. He whispered toward it, his voice carried by the slow wind of creation. "I have not left you," he said. "I have only walked into what you made." For a moment he thought he saw an answering light, a shimmer of gold flowing gently through the silver of his own flame. The warmth of it touched him, and he felt the old love again, vast and forgiving. Then it faded, leaving only the quiet hum of the worlds beginning to form. He lingered in that place for ages uncounted, guiding the new fires that bloomed in the dark. Sometimes he watched them die, their light returning to shadow, and he learned to mourn without bitterness. Other times he watched them flourish, forming galaxies that spiraled like slow dances across eternity. Each one carried a trace of his voice, the melody of the first dawn. There were moments when he wept. His tears fell like sparks, becoming new stars. He thought of heaven and the angels he had loved, of Azrael's calm wisdom, of the Creator's voice. In those moments he understood that his exile was not punishment but purpose, a widening of the song, not its ending. At last, when the stars had found their places and the first worlds had cooled from fire into stone, he descended to one small sphere, still veiled in mist. He walked upon its surface, the dust rising beneath his feet like incense. The air was young, full of promise and silence. He touched the ground, and where his fingers brushed the soil, Light gathered in the shape of blossoms, pale flowers that opened and closed like breathing. He knelt among them and whispered, "Let there be gentleness here. Let those who come after remember that light was never meant to conquer darkness, but to embrace it." The flowers shimmered, their glow faint as candlelight, yet they endured through the long night that followed. Their roots drank both shadow and flame, and their scent filled the new air with sweetness. Lucifer stood, looking eastward. A pale glow began to rise along the horizon, not his doing, but the world's own awakening. The first sun lifted from the depths, scattering gold across the waters. The light struck his wings, and for a moment they blazed with all the beauty of what he once had been. He closed his eyes and bowed his head. When he opened them again, tears glittered upon his cheeks, catching the dawn. "It is enough," he murmured. "The song continues." He spread his wings. Their feathers shimmered silver and shadow, the perfect union of both. With a single motion he rose into the warming sky, neither falling nor ascending, but moving in endless balance. The winds of the newborn world carried his song across the waters, soft as breath, tender as forgiveness. Some say that song still lingers, the hum that greets the first light of every morning, the hush that follows the last note of every prayer. It is not a lament, but a promise that even what has fallen can become part of dawn. And so the morning star shines still, neither condemned nor forgotten, but forever rising where light touches darkness, and both remember they were once the same. The northern sea breathed with a rhythm older than any name. Each wave rolled ashore like a memory retold, the foam whispering secrets to the sand before retreating again into silence. The coast stretched in long silver curves, where stones glistened like sleeping seals under the pale moon. At the edge of that quiet world stood a single cottage, roofed with driftwood and bound by ropes of kelp. Its windows glowed faintly, warm against the vast blue darkness. Inside, a fisherman sat by the hearth mending his nets. His hands were weathered, his hair touched with salt, and his eyes carried the calm of one who has spent a lifetime listening to waves. The fire crackled softly, its light moving across shells and bits of coral that lined the shelves. Outside, the sea murmured as though calling a familiar name. He paused in his work, listening. It was a sound he had known all his life, the language of water and wind. But tonight it seemed different. There was music in it, faint and sorrowful, like a voice half remembered from a dream. He rose, took his lantern, and stepped out into the cool night. The air was sharp with brine. The tide had drawn low, exposing long ribbons of seaweed and pools that mirrored the stars. The moon hung full and clear above the horizon, turning the wet sand to glass. He walked toward the water, his boots leaving shallow prints behind him. Then he saw her. At first she seemed part of the sea itself, a shimmer of movement just beyond the rocks. But as he drew closer, he saw a figure kneeling at the tide's edge, her hair dark and heavy with water, her skin pale as moonlight. She was wrapped in something that glistened like wet silk, and at her feet lay a seal's skin, gleaming softly in the lantern's glow. The fisherman stopped, uncertain. He had heard the old tales told by his mother long ago, stories of selkies, the seal folk who shed their skins to walk upon the shore. They were said to be beautiful and sorrowful creatures, forever caught between two worlds. He had never believed them, though he had often wished he could. The woman turned. Her eyes were deep and dark, like the sea after a storm. "You should not be here," she said gently. Her voice carried the rhythm of waves against stone. He lowered his lantern. "Nor should you," he replied, though his words came with a smile. "The night is cold." She looked toward the horizon where the water shimmered faintly. Cold does not trouble those who belong to the tide. He glanced at the seal's skin lying beside her. "And yet you stand on land." A faint smile touched her lips, quick as a ripple. Only for a little while. The sea calls me back before dawn." He watched the water shift around her feet, the foam tracing delicate patterns before sliding away. "If you leave your skin behind, they say you cannot return." Her gaze lingered on him. "Then I must keep it close." He hesitated, then stepped nearer. "I will not take it from you." "I know," she said, and her voice softened. "But others have, and so we keep our distance." They stood in silence, listening to the slow whisper of the tide. The wind brushed her hair, carrying the scent of salt and something sweet he could not name. He felt as though the sea itself had taken human form before him, vast, unknowable, and endlessly gentle. At last she spoke again. "Why do you walk the shore so late?" "I mend my nets by day," he said, "and dream by night. The sea gives me both fish and silence, but tonight it called differently." "It calls differently to those who listen," she murmured. "The sea remembers kindness." He frowned slightly. "Kindness?" She met his eyes. "You once freed a seal tangled in your lines." He blinked, startled. It had been years ago, the stormy afternoon when he had cut a struggling seal loose from his nets. "How would you know that?" Her smile deepened. "Because it was me." The words seemed to still the very wind. The fisherman stared, the lantern trembling slightly in his hand. The stories he had once dismissed rose now around him like surf, every whisper of selkies and lost hearts suddenly real. "You remember," he said quietly. "I remember everything the sea remembers," she replied, "and it remembers mercy." The tide crept closer, lapping at their feet. The water was cold but alive, curling around his boots like a gentle hand. She bent to pick up her seal's skin, the movement graceful as a wave folding back on itself. "Must you go so soon?" he asked, though he knew the answer. "I must. The dawn would bind me here, and the sea would grieve." He nodded, though the thought ached. "Then let me thank you for reminding me the stories were true." Her eyes softened. "They are all true in their own way. But remember this, fisherman. We are not meant to be captured, nor to be forgotten. When you hear the sea sing again, it is not warning but greeting." She stepped backward into the surf. The water rose to her knees, her waist. The skin shimmered in her arms like living silver. For a moment she stood still, the waves breaking around her, and then she slipped the seal's hide across her shoulders. Light rippled along her form, and she was gone, a seal sleek and swift, gliding into the dark water. The fisherman stood watching long after the ripples faded. The lantern burned low in his hand, its flame trembling in the wind. He thought he heard her voice once more, distant and musical, mingling with the song of the waves. He turned back toward the cottage as the sky began to pale. The fire inside had burned down to embers, but the air still smelled faintly of salt and seaweed. He set the lantern down and looked once more through the window toward the water. Just beyond the rocks, a single seal lifted its head from the waves. The creature's eyes met his, calm and shining, before it slipped beneath the surface. He smiled, feeling both loss and peace. When he slept, the sea sang softly in his dreams. It told of a world without boundaries, where land and tide danced forever, and of a woman who could never stay but would always return with the changing moon. And from that night on, whenever he walked the shore and the wind turned gentle, he felt her presence in the sound of the surf, a reminder that kindness once given is never forgotten, even by the sea. The lighthouse stood alone on the cliff, its white stone tower rising like a prayer above the restless sea. The wind never stopped there. It came from every direction at once, carrying salt, mist, and the distant cry of gulls. For 70 years the lamp had burned each night without fail, turning in slow, patient circles to guide ships away from the hidden rocks below. To the sailors who crossed those waters, it was a constant star, a promise of safe return. At the foot of the tower lived a young woman named Isla, daughter of the keeper. Her father's beard was as grey as driftwood, and his eyes carried the same steady calm as the lamp he tended. She had grown up with the sound of waves as lullaby and wind as companion. Every morning, she helped polish the great lens, and every night, she watched the light sweep across the water like the blink of a giant eye. She loved the sea, as one loves a story told too many times, familiar, unending, and always slightly changed. Yet lately, she had begun to sense something new in its rhythm. The tides seemed to breathe differently. The waves broke against the rocks in softer tones. At dusk, she often lingered outside, listening. Her father would call to her from the tower. "The wind's turning, Ela, best come in." But she would stand a moment longer, her shawl drawn close, watching how the last light slid across the horizon. Some evenings, she thought she saw a faint shimmer beneath the surface, something moving gracefully through the depths. When she mentioned it, her father only smiled. "Old eyes see storms coming," he said. "Young ones see miracles." One night, as the lamp began its slow rotation, Isla climbed the stairs to the lantern room. From that height, the world spread vast and silent. The waves below glowed faintly in the starlight, and the horizon shone like the edge of a blade. She turned the crank that kept the lens moving, the familiar creak echoing up the stone walls. Then she heard a sound that did not belong to the sea. A faint melody carried on the wind. It was neither human nor bird, a voice without words, woven of sorrow and beauty. It rose and fell with the tide, fading whenever she held her breath, returning whenever she exhaled. She leaned out through the open hatch, searching the darkness. The song came from the water far below, where the waves curled pale around the rocks. For a moment she saw movement, something slender and luminous, turning beneath the foam. A shimmer, like silver cloth, rippled through the current, and the song deepened, filling the air until her heart ached. The wind caught her shawl and tore it free, sending it spiraling downward. It vanished into the sea. The song stopped. The silence that followed was so sudden, it rang in her ears. When she told her father at dawn, he frowned but did not scold. "You've heard the Selkie songs," he said quietly. "They come when the sea grows lonely. Best not to answer." "But it was beautiful," Isla whispered. "Beauty is how the sea remembers," he said, "not how it forgives." Days passed. The weather turned colder, and the wind brought mist so thick the lamp's light vanished within it. Ships crept cautiously along the coast, their horns echoing through the grey. Ela kept to her work, polishing brass, tending oil, and writing in the log her father kept since before she was born. Yet the memory of that voice lingered in her like the taste of salt on her lips. One evening, while refilling the lamp's reservoir, she heard it again, faint, distant and calling. This time it was not sorrowful. It was inviting, almost tender. She looked through the thick glass of the lens, and there in the fog below, she saw a shape moving toward the shore. A figure half shadow, half light, trailing silver across the surface of the sea. Her father was asleep in the room below. She hesitated, torn between reason and wonder, then took the lantern and stepped outside. The air was cold and smelled of rain. The path down to the cove wound steeply between rocks slick with spray. She moved carefully, her lantern's glow flickering across the dark stone. At the bottom, the tide had drawn back, leaving pools that mirrored the stars. The song came again, soft and close. She turned toward the sound and saw her shawl caught among the rocks. It was dry, though it had lain by the water for days, and folded neatly as if placed there by careful hands. When she picked it up, the sea stirred. A ripple of light crossed the surface, and from that light rose a man, or something like one. His hair was dark as the deep water, his eyes grey as rain. Around his shoulders hung a cloak that shimmered like a seal's skin. "Do not fear," he said, his voice the same melody she had heard before, I have come to return what you lost. You found my shawl? She asked, though she knew it was not what he meant. He smiled faintly. It belonged to you once, long ago, when you walked the tides as I do. You left it here when you chose the shore. She shook her head. I am no creature of the sea. Not now, he said gently. But the sea remembers what we forget. She looked at the water, then at him. There was no menace in his face, only an infinite sadness, as if he carried the memory of every storm. Why do you sing to me? She asked. Because the light you keep calls to us, he said. Every night it reaches across the waves, and the ocean listens. We come to see who tends it with such care. The light is for sailors, she said, so they find their way home. He nodded. And sometimes, for those who have no home but the sea. The wind rose, carrying spray between them. He looked toward the horizon where the fog began to lift, revealing a faint rim of dawn. I must go before the sun finds me, he said. Will you come again? She asked. If the lamp still burns, he said, and his smile was small but true. He touched the edge of her shawl, then turned and stepped into the water. The waves closed around him, shining faintly, and then he was gone. When Iliad climbed back to the lighthouse, the first light of morning broke across the sea. She looked down at the shawl in her hands. It smelled of salt and something sweet, and when she draped it over her shoulders, warmth spread through her as though she had stepped into sunlight. Her father found her there and said nothing, only nodded once as if he understood. That night, the lamp turned again in its steady arc. Its beam reached far across the dark water, and somewhere out beyond the horizon, a faint answering glow flickered in time with it, two lights moving together through the endless sea. The sea was still the next morning, too still for comfort. The waves held their breath, and the horizon blurred where the pale sky met the water. Ila woke before dawn, and found the air thick with silence. The lamp above her head had burned through the night, its flame steady even against the wind. Yet she felt a strange unease she could not name. She stepped outside and looked toward the shore. The tide was lower than she had ever seen. Rocks usually hidden beneath the foam now glistened bare, their wet surfaces reflecting the fading stars. Her father was already awake, leaning on his staff near the cliff's edge. His eyes searched the horizon with the calm of someone who had seen every mood of the sea. She's holding her breath, he said softly. When the ocean grows this quiet, it means she's listening. Listening to what? Ila asked. He didn't answer right away. To whatever stirs beneath her heart, he said finally. There are places deep enough that even the stars can't see them. Some say they're full of memory, not monsters. She followed his gaze toward the endless grey. A current moved far out, twisting like smoke beneath the surface. For a heartbeat she thought she saw something rise, an immense shadow gliding just below the calm water, slow and deliberate, like the thought of an ancient being. Then it vanished, leaving only ripples. Her father sighed. The deep remembers us more than we remember it. We shine our lights, build our towers, and still she dreams of the first dawn. The day passed in a hush that felt sacred. Gulls flew low, their wings barely stirring the air. The smell of salt thickened until it tasted like iron on the tongue. Toward evening, clouds gathered, soft and luminous, but no wind came. Ila tended the lamp as she always did, cleaning the lens, checking the oil, polishing the brass until it gleamed. The routines comforted her. They were the heartbeat of her world, yet she could not shake the feeling that the sea was waiting for what? She did not know. When night fell, the fog rolled in without warning, dense and silver. The beam of the lamp turned through it, but each sweep dissolved almost instantly. From below came the slow pulse of the waves returning, stronger now, deliberate. The sound echoed up the cliff like the breath of a sleeping giant. Her father came to stand beside her. "Keep the light turning," he said quietly. Whatever comes, it will need to see. Do you think it's a storm? She asked. No storm moves with patience, he said. This is older than weather. They watched together as the fog thickened. Then, through the grey, something shimmered, far below, out on the water, a glow deep and blue, pulsing gently like a heartbeat beneath glass. It spread in slow circles, illuminating the waves from within. The sea glowed as if lit by moonlight trapped beneath its surface. Isla felt the pull of it in her chest, a vibration that matched her pulse. The light grew brighter, rising toward the surface until it became almost blinding. Then it broke through. What emerged was not a creature. Not entirely. It was a form of water and light, vast and fluid, its surface rippling like silk. Within it moved shapes like wings or fins, shifting and dissolving, as though it could not decide what to be. It rose until its crown touched the air, and there it paused, towering above the waves. Her father whispered something too soft to hear. Isla could not move. The being turned its gaze, or what felt like a gaze, toward the lighthouse. The lamp's beam swept across it, and the light refracted, scattering into 1,000 shards of color. The cliffs shimmered, painted with shifting hues of blue and gold. Then a sound came, deep and resonant. Not spoken but felt. It moved through the air, like the echo of a bell struck beneath the sea. In her mind, Isla heard words that were not words. Child of the shore, keeper of flame, why do you wake the deep? She trembled, her heart pounding. I do not wake you, she whispered. I only guide those who travel the surface. The surface forgets. The voice murmured, its tone neither kind nor cruel. It shines and fades, but the depths endure. The lamp burns and its fire reaches down through the dark. It stirs memories that should sleep. Her father stepped forward. If memory is light, then let it rise, he said firmly. His voice was steady, though his hands shook. We have kept the lamp for generations, so that the sea may remember, not just loss, but kindness. The being regarded him, its light shifting into softer tones. Kindness, it echoed, and the sound carried through the mist like the song of a whale. Once the deep was full of such things. The first light came from compassion, not conquest. Isla felt tears gather without knowing why. Will you harm us? She asked. Harm? The voice rippled, uncertain. No, we do not harm what remembers us. We only rise to remind the world that balance is not silence. Tell your flame to burn gently. Tell it to listen between its own pulses. Then the glow began to fade. The figure lowered itself slowly into the sea, dissolving back into the water from which it had come. The waves closed over it, glowing faintly for a moment longer before returning to darkness. The fog began to lift, torn apart by the first breath of wind. When it was gone, the sea was calm again, though its calm felt alive, watchful. Isla and her father stood in silence, the wind tugging at their coats. The lamp turned above them, its light steady but warmer somehow, as if tempered by what it had seen. Was it real? Isla asked at last. Her father looked toward the horizon. As real as anything the sea chooses to remember. They climbed back to the lantern room, and for a long while they stood watching the beam sweep across the sleeping water. In its path, faint trails of blue light still shimmered, marking where the being had passed. Before dawn, the old man spoke again. When my time ends, you'll keep the lamp. Yes, she said, always. Then listen for the silence, he told her. That's where the sea speaks truth. When morning came, the sky was clear and golden. The waves broke softly against the rocks, and the air smelled clean and new. The lighthouse gleamed white in the sun, and its lamp, though unlit in daylight, caught the light and scattered it in bright circles across the cliffs. That day, Fishermen far out on the water swore they saw something glowing beneath the surface, a vast ring of blue light turning slowly in the deep. They said it sang without sound, like the hum of the earth itself. And in the lantern room, Isla stood beside the window, her hand resting on the glass, and whispered to the horizon, "We are listening." At the edge of the ancient desert, where the river curved like a serpent of silver, rose the city of Uruk. Its walls gleamed under the sun, vast and unbroken, built of stone so finely fitted that not even wind could slip between the joins. The people said the walls were a song made solid, raised by hands guided by gods. From the high gates to the temples crowned with gold, every stone seemed to hum with memory. Inside those walls lived Gilgamesh, the king who was more than a man, 2/3 divine, 1/3 dust of the earth. He walked through his city at dawn, when the streets were still and the air smelled of river reeds and warm clay. The towers caught the first light, throwing long shadows across the courtyards. Fishermen mended their nets along the banks. Potters set their wheels turning. Children chased each other through the dust. Everywhere he went, people bowed. Yet beneath their reverence, he felt unease, a distance carved not by awe alone, but by the space between his strength and their fragility. He paused at the western wall, the one that faced the endless steppe. Beyond it stretched a horizon of golden light, a world both wild and free. He often looked that way when the duties of kingship pressed too heavily upon him. The priests called him blessed, yet he felt the blessing as a burden. How could one so close to the divine ever truly belong among mortals? When the rituals ended, he remained alone upon the high platform. The stones beneath his feet were warm from the sun. He looked down upon his people, so small from this height, moving through their day with purpose and laughter. They had families, dreams, and time enough to grow old. He had only endless vigor, a heart that beat too fiercely to rest. The gods had granted him strength but not understanding. At midday, he climbed the ziggurat, the great temple that rose in spirals toward the sky. From its summit, he could see the river curling far below, its surface dotted with boats like drifting leaves. The priest stood beside him, chanting hymns to Shamash, the sun god. Gilgamesh raised his hands and joined them, but his voice faltered. The prayers felt hollow, as though he spoke them through glass. The wind rose, carrying the scent of tamarisk and the murmur of the river. Gilgamesh closed his eyes and listened. In that sound he heard something that felt like yearning, not of the city, but of his own heart. The strength that built Uruk's walls could not build peace within him. As dusk approached, he walked through the gardens that lined the palace courtyards. The air was heavy with the scent of figs and date blossoms. Servants bowed as he passed, their eyes lowered. Near the central fountain, he saw a young mother holding her child. The boy reached for the falling water, laughing, and for a moment Gilgamesh felt the edge of something tender stir within him, a longing not for power, but for connection. He wanted to speak, to ask the woman her name, to bless the child. Yet when he approached, she knelt so quickly that the moment dissolved. That night he could not sleep. He lay upon his bed of carved cedar, listening to the wind pressing softly against the shutters. Beyond the palace the city murmured, the quiet voices of lovers, the distant hum of music from the taverns, the whisper of sandals on stone. The life of Uruk was vast and full, yet he felt apart from it, like a god forgotten among his own creation. He rose and stepped out onto the balcony. The moon hung low, its reflection trembling in the river. The city lights flickered like fireflies in the dark. He leaned upon the railing, his hands tracing the cool stone. "If I am more than man," he whispered, "why do I feel so human?" "Who are you?" he asked. A soft voice answered from the shadows below, "Because even kings are made of breath." He started, peering into the dark. A figure stood among the garden's trees, a woman clothed in pale linen, her hair shining like water. She was not one of his servants. Her presence carried the stillness of prophecy. "I am only a messenger," she said. "The gods hear your restlessness, Gilgamesh. They will not grant you peace until you learn what lies beyond your walls." He frowned. "Beyond, there is only wilderness." She smiled, "And in wilderness, truth." Before he could answer, she was gone. The air shimmered where she had stood, and the fragrance of lotus lingered long after. The elders exchanged uneasy glances. "My king," one said, "the gods gave us these walls for safety. Beyond them roam beasts and storms. You are needed here." The next morning, Gilgamesh summoned his council. "The walls of Uruk stand strong," he said, "but they confine the spirit. A city cannot live forever behind stone. I would see what lies beyond." That evening, he climbed once more to the top of the city's walls. The sun was setting, staining the river gold. From this height, Uruk glowed like an ember in the vastness of the plain. He could hear laughter rising from the streets below, music, footsteps, life, yet the horizon called to him more than any sound within. Gilgamesh's gaze swept across their faces, kind but resolute. A king who knows only safety forgets what strength is for. The gods did not make me to rule in comfort. He dismissed them with a gesture. The hall emptied, but their whispers lingered like dust in the air. The wind shifted, carrying faint voices, laughter that was not human, the cry of a bird he had never heard before, and the sigh of the desert. Somewhere beyond those walls, something waited. Not glory, not conquest, but understanding. That night, as he drifted into uneasy sleep, he dreamed of a man walking through the wild hair tangled with leaves, skin bronzed by sun, eyes filled with calm. The man looked at him without fear. "You build walls," he said. "I build nothing, yet both of us seek the same thing." As darkness fell, he spoke softly to the wind. "If there is something beyond this order, show it to me." He whispered to himself, "Perhaps wisdom does not come from stone, but from dust." Far below, the river murmured, carrying the reflection of the walls downstream toward lands unseen. The city slept, unaware that its king was already preparing to follow the voice that had called him beyond its gates. Gilgamesh woke before dawn, the dream clinging to him like mist. He went to the window, where the first light was rising over the desert. He felt in that moment that the dream was not a dream at all, but a promise. At the riverbank, he found reeds bent as though something powerful had passed through. The air smelled of wild honey and rain. He crouched, touching the prints with his hand. They were warm still, and the feeling that filled him was neither fear nor caution, but curiosity. For many days he traveled through the grasslands, sleeping under stars so bright they seemed close enough to touch. The land changed with every step. Green fields gave way to barren plains, plains to hills, hills to deep forests where light fell in long golden shafts. In that forest he first saw the tracks, footprints wider than any man's, pressed deep into the earth. The shape of them was human, yet not quite. The wind that moved across the plains beyond Uruk carried the scent of cedar and dust. It was a living wind, older than the city's stones, whispering of untamed rivers and far-off mountains. Gilgamesh rode into it at dawn, leaving the great walls behind. He did not look back. The road ahead shimmered beneath the rising sun, empty and endless. Around him stretched the open world, vast and alive with the hum of unseen creatures. For the first time, he felt the weight of silence, not as loneliness, but as invitation. That night, he dreamed again. In his sleep, he stood before a great tree, whose roots touched the underworld, and whose crown brushed the stars. From its shadow stepped the man he had seen before, the one of his dream in Uruk, the one made of wildness. His hair was thick and tangled, his eyes clear as water. "Who are you?" Gilgamesh asked. "I am what you forgot," the man said. "I am what lives before the walls." When he awoke, dawn was breaking. He rose and walked deeper into the forest, guided by instinct. The path wound through ferns and fallen logs, the air alive with the hum of bees. He followed the sound of running water until he came to a spring clear as glass. There, kneeling to drink, was the figure from his dream. The man turned. His face was calm, his gaze neither humble nor proud. He wore only a cloak of animal skins, and the muscles beneath his sun-darkened skin moved with the ease of a creature born free. "You found me," he said simply. "I sought nothing," Gilgamesh replied. "The path brought me." "Then we have both been called," the man said, standing. "My name is Enkidu." They studied each other in silence. The king of Uruk, polished and regal, and the man of the wild, unshaped and unruled. Yet in that silence they saw a reflection, as though each carried the other's missing piece. Gilgamesh broke the stillness first. "The gods have strange designs," he said. "They send me visions of walls and wind, then place a man before me who belongs to neither." Enkidu smiled faintly. "Perhaps they send you mirrors, not messages." Gilgamesh laughed, a sound that startled birds from the nearby trees. "Then tell me, mirror, what do you see?" In the days that followed, they traveled together. Enkidu showed him how to read the signs of weather, how to follow the trail of deer, how to find the sweet roots that hid beneath the soil. Gilgamesh, in turn, spoke of Uruk, of music and firelight, of the stone terraces that gleamed like sunrise. Each listened with wonder, as though the other's world were a story newly told. "I see a man who calls himself a god, and forgets that gods, too, were born of earth." The words struck gently but deep. Gilgamesh said nothing. He sat by the spring, and Enkidu sat beside him. The forest buzzed softly around them. For a long while they spoke little, yet something settled between them, an understanding not built from words, but from quiet respect. One evening, they rested beside a fallen cedar. The stars above were wide and countless, their reflections trembling in the spring nearby. Enkidu looked upward. "Do you ever think the sky watches us?" Enkidu nodded slowly. "The animals know that. They never ask the sky for answers. They live, and that is their prayer. Always," Gilgamesh said. "It watches and waits. I used to believe it envied us, that the gods feared our strength. Now I think it only hopes we will remember we are part of it." "You speak as though you envy them." Gilgamesh turned toward him. "And yet you left them." "I do," Enkidu said softly. "They do not know loneliness." "Because I heard the laughter of men," Enkidu said, "and I wanted to understand it." The fire between them flickered, throwing gold across their faces. The silence that followed was full of peace. When morning came, they rose and continued north toward the great cedar forest. Said to be guarded by spirits, Gilgamesh had heard the tales in childhood, of trees so tall they touched the clouds, of a guardian carved from shadow. Yet as they approached, he felt no fear. The forest ahead shimmered with mist, and the air was fragrant with resin and rain. At its edge, Enkidu stopped. "This is sacred ground," he said. "The guardian watches even now." "Then let him watch," Gilgamesh said, his voice calm. "I come not to conquer, but to see." They stepped beneath the first great branches. The light dimmed to green and gold. Around them, the trunks rose like pillars, each so wide that 10 men could not have encircled it. The ground was soft with needles, the air humming with unseen life. As they walked, a deep sound echoed through the wood, a rumble that seemed to come from the trees themselves. The sound grew into words, low and resonant. Gilgamesh looked up. Between two massive trunks stood a figure formed of bark and mist, its eyes glowing like amber, the guardian of the forest, Humbaba. His presence filled the air like thunder. Who treads the roots of the eternal? The guardian regarded him with long silence. Kings come with axes, not questions. Gilgamesh bowed his head. I am Gilgamesh of Uruk. This forest has called to me in dreams. I come seeking not power, but wisdom. Then let me come differently, Gilgamesh said. To remind him that strength is gentler when it listens, Enkidu said. The forest hushed. Even the wind seemed to pause. Humbaba's gaze turned to Enkidu. And you, child of the wild, why lead him here? The guardian's voice softened. Then you may both enter. But know this, every tree here remembers. Step lightly and leave your pride among the roots. They bowed, and the forest seemed to open before them, light spilling down in silver beams. As they walked deeper, Gilgamesh felt something within him ease. The heartbeat of the earth was steady beneath his feet, and Enkidu's presence beside him was like a compass guiding him through the living maze. For the first time, he did not feel half divine or half mortal. He felt whole. When night fell, they made camp beneath a great cedar. The stars above were hidden by the canopy, yet their light filtered through in quiet glimmers. Enkidu lay close to the earth, listening to the whispers of the roots. Gilgamesh lay beside him, hands folded behind his head. We already have, Gilgamesh said. The gods gave me strength, but the earth has given me a friend. Do you think we will find what we seek? Enkidu asked. Enkidu smiled, and the forest, as if hearing them, breathed a soft sigh that rustled through its leaves. Gilgamesh sat up and watched the smoke from their dying fire twist upward through the branches. His heart was quiet, but a weight lingered there. The days of travel had softened him. Yet he felt a shadow of unease that no rest could lift. He looked at Enkidu and saw peace in his stillness, a peace he both admired and feared. How easily the wild accepted life and death as equal parts of the same rhythm. But he, born among wolves, could not. When Enkidu woke, they walked deeper into the forest. The path wound downward toward the sound of running water. As they descended, the trees grew older, their trunks gnarled and wide, their roots coiling through stone. The air grew cooler, heavy with the scent of moss and river silt. The forest slept beneath a veil of mist. Its breath was cool, its silence deep. When Gilgamesh woke, the first light of dawn filtered through the leaves in trembling gold. The scent of cedar filled the air, rich and clean. Beside him, Enkidu still slept, one arm resting across his chest, his face turned toward the earth, as if listening even in dreams. Somewhere high above, a bird began to sing, a slow, sweet melody that seemed older than the trees themselves. Enkidu crouched beside him. This is the river that divides memory and forgetting, he said softly. Its waters are sacred. Those who drink from it lose the sharpness of sorrow, but they lose wonder too. At last, they reached a valley where a great stream flowed through the shadows. Its surface shimmered faintly, silver in the dim light. The guardian's words returned to Gilgamesh. Every tree here remembers. He knelt at the water's edge, gazing into the current. His reflection looked back at him, the face of a man both mortal and not, strong but uncertain. Gilgamesh dipped his hand into the stream. The water was cold, almost weightless, and it slid through his fingers like silk. Would you drink? He asked. Gilgamesh stared into the current. The river whispered softly, carrying voices like fragments of dreams. He could almost make out words, echoes of the people of Uruk, laughter from the markets, the hum of the walls in sunlight. Then he heard something else, penetrating, sorrowful, the faint cry of his own heart repeating a truth he had never wanted to face. Enkidu shook his head. I belong to both memory and forgetting. The forest holds me here. But you, You were born to seek beyond. All things end, it said, even kings. He drew back, startled. The water rippled as if it had spoken through him. Why should I live knowing that, he murmured. They sat together for a long time, the water murmuring between them. A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of rain from far away. Then, from beyond the river, came a low rumble. Not thunder, but something deeper, as if the earth itself exhaled. The sound faded into stillness, and the forest grew hushed, because only those who know it can live fully, Enkidu said. The gods are eternal, but they cannot taste the sweetness of each hour as we can. Gilgamesh felt the air change. Something ends here, he said. Or begins, Enkidu replied. The days that followed passed in quiet. They built a small shelter of branches near the stream, and lived simply, hunting, gathering fruit, sleeping under the open sky. Gilgamesh found a strange peace in the rhythm of it. The noise of his thoughts softened, yet he also began to dream more vividly. Visions of Uruk's walls crumbling into sand, of his name fading from memory like carvings worn by wind. One night, he dreamed of Enkidu standing by the river. His reflection doubled in the water. The wild man smiled, but behind him rose a darkness that swallowed the trees. Gilgamesh tried to reach him, but the river widened, and Enkidu's image drifted away, dissolving into ripples. He woke with his heart pounding. Enkidu lay beside him, breathing evenly, unaware. The sound of the river filled the night, steady, endless, indifferent. The next morning, the sky turned grey. Clouds gathered low over the forest, and the air smelled of storm. Enkidu was quiet as they prepared to move on. He glanced at Gilgamesh, his eyes thoughtful. If the gods call me back to the wild, would you let me go? All things return to where they began, Enkidu said. You taught me the language of men, but the earth still speaks my name. Gilgamesh frowned. Why would they? Gilgamesh shook his head. I will not lose you. Enkidu smiled gently. No one truly keeps another. We walk beside one another, nothing more. When the rain finally eased, the forest seemed transformed. Mist rose from the ground, curling through the air like smoke. The river swelled, its current faster, wilder. Enkidu stepped toward it, drawn by its sound. Gilgamesh reached to stop him, but the wild man smiled and raised a hand. The storm came at midday. The forest darkened as rain poured in sheets, drumming against the leaves. They took shelter beneath a fallen cedar. Lightning flashed, illuminating the trunks in ghostly light. For hours, they waited, wrapped in silence broken only by thunder. Do you hear it? Enkidu asked. The water remembers us. He knelt by the edge and touched the surface. Light flared briefly beneath his fingers, then dimmed. His eyes softened, full of understanding. When I go, do not build walls around my memory, he said. Let it move like the river. Gilgamesh's throat tightened. You speak as if the gods have spoken already. They always have, Enkidu whispered. We just learned to listen too late. Before Gilgamesh could reply, the wind rose sharply, scattering the mist. A sudden brightness shone around Enkidu, a shimmer like dawn breaking underwater. His form blurred, becoming light and shadow together, then drifted into the air like a sigh. The forest grew utterly silent. The sky darkened again, though no rain fell. The air grew still, the forest holding its breath. Enkidu looked up, then back at Gilgamesh, and in that look was peace. Thank you for showing me the world of men, he said. Now I will show you the truth of the wild. Gilgamesh fell to his knees. The river flowed as before, unbroken, unhurried. Only a small ripple marked where Enkidu had stood. He reached out but touched only water. All through the night he remained by the river's edge, unmoving. The stars returned overhead, their reflections trembling on the surface. He did not weep, he only listened to the steady rhythm of the current, to the faint whisper that might have been a farewell. By dawn the storm was gone. The air smelled fresh, and the forest shone with droplets like jewels. Gilgamesh rose, exhausted but clear-eyed. He looked into the river one last time and saw not his reflection, but the faint image of Enkidu smiling back, fading slowly into light. Then he turned away, the forest opening before him. The path led toward the mountains, where clouds touched the peaks like veils. He walked with slow steps, his shadow long upon the ground. The sound of the river followed him, soft and constant, carrying his promise into the endless land beyond. He whispered, "I will remember." The dawn in the southern sea was pale gold, and the air smelled of salt and sandalwood. Along the shore, the waves folded gently upon themselves, like hands in prayer. On the far side of that endless blue stretched an island veiled in mist. Lanka, the realm of distance and longing. Rama stood upon the sands, his bow resting at his side, his eyes steady on the horizon. Around him moved an army not of steel but of devotion, the monkey clans of the forest, led by Hanuman, son of the wind. The journey had been long, the trials deep, yet the moment felt still, suspended between hope and silence. Rama's heart was calm. His beloved Sita waited across the sea, her faith a light unbroken. He closed his eyes and listened. The wind carried voices, soft, reverent, of those who gathered to build what no hands had ever built before, a bridge of stones across the ocean. Hanuman approached, his fur silvered by dawn. He knelt in the sand, the air rippling faintly around him with divine energy. "My lord," he said, "the tide is ready. The stones will hold if the heart that lays them is pure." Rama opened his eyes. "Then let the sea bear witness." At his word, thousands moved. They lifted stones large and small, each inscribed with his name. The air filled with the sound of chanting, deep and rhythmic, the syllables of devotion rising like waves. One by one, the stones were cast upon the water, and they floated. The ocean, stirred by faith, held them gently, arranging them in a path that gleamed under the morning sun. Hanuman leapt lightly from rock to rock, his movements graceful as wind through leaves. "The sea bows to your name," he called, "but it is your compassion, not your power, that steadies it." Rama smiled faintly. "The sea bows to love, Hanuman. Even the wind must learn humility before it." The work continued through the day. From the cliffs above, flocks of white herons watched in silence. The ocean glowed where the bridge spread outward, its edges shimmering with light. By sunset, the first span reached far into the mist. Fires burned along the shore, and songs rose, a hymn not of conquest but of longing fulfilled through faith. As the stars appeared, Rama walked to the water's edge. He looked upon the bridge and saw not stone, but the joined strength of countless hearts. "How many names must a bridge hold to reach love?" he asked quietly. "As many as the waves that touch it," Hanuman replied. They stood together beneath the starlight. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of jasmine from the far island. Rama's thoughts turned inward, to the promise he had made, to the exile that had shaped him, to the peace he sought, not through victory, but through understanding. "Hanuman," he said, "when I see her again, what should I say?" The wind-born smiled. "You should say nothing. Her heart has already heard every word you've spoken to the sky." Rama looked across the sea. The stars trembled on its surface like scattered blossoms. For a moment, he thought he saw a light flicker in the distance, a flame moving gently as though waiting. His breath deepened. "Tomorrow we cross." That night, the camp grew quiet. The fires dimmed, and the ocean whispered against the sand. Rama lay upon the ground, his cloak drawn about him. He could not sleep. His thoughts were vast as the sky, filled with memory and love. He thought of the forests they had crossed, the friends who had fallen, the lessons the world had given him in humility. Strength had brought him here, but gentleness would carry him forward. Before dawn, he rose and walked alone to the half-built bridge. The sea was dark and calm, the wind cool against his skin. He stepped upon the first stones, feeling the rhythm of the water beneath them. Each step seemed to echo within him, as though the ocean remembered every heartbeat that had ever trusted its surface. At the midpoint of the bridge, he paused. The horizon ahead glowed faintly, the first trace of morning. He knelt and touched the water. It was neither warm nor cold, but alive, pulsing softly under his palm. "Grant me passage," he whispered, "not to conquer, but to return love to where it was lost." The sea answered in silence, and yet the stillness felt like a scent. The wind stirred, carrying the scent of rain and lilies. Behind him, Hanuman approached, quiet as dawn. "You speak to the sea as if it were a friend," he said. Rama turned, smiling. "It is. It holds the reflection of all who have looked upon it. In its heart, there are no enemies." Hanuman bowed. "Then it will bear you safely." When the sun rose, the world turned to gold. The sea blazed with light, and the bridge shone as though woven of flame. The army stood ready, but Rama raised his hand. "Today," he said, "we cross not as warriors, but as seekers. The path we tread is one of compassion, for even sorrow can lead to peace when the heart remains true." They stepped forward, thousands moving together across the floating stones. The ocean roared below, not in defiance but in song. Dolphins leapt beside them, their sleek forms glimmering like silver arcs. The wind wrapped around them, warm and alive, carrying the sound of drums and chants across the waves. Halfway across, the sky darkened briefly, a veil of cloud drifting over the sun. The air trembled, and a single drop of rain fell upon Rama's brow. It was cool, sweet, and full of memory. He lifted his gaze and whispered, "May all who cross this sea find home again." The clouds parted. Light returned, brighter than before. Ahead, the mist began to thin, revealing the faint shape of Lanka, its peaks rising like emerald towers from the blue. Hanuman turned to him. "Do you see it?" "I do," Rama said, his voice low. "But what I truly see is what brought us here, the bridge of faith between hearts." They continued until their feet touched the sands of the far shore. Rama stepped onto the island and felt the ground pulse beneath him, as though welcoming him home. The wind sighed through the palms, carrying with it a sound that could have been a song or a blessing. Hanuman knelt beside him once more. "The bridge stands strong," he said. "It will outlast even time." Rama looked back across the sea. The bridge stretched all the way to the horizon, shining beneath the sun. "Nothing made by devotion ever fades," he said softly. "It becomes part of the wind itself." The waves lapped gently at their feet. The journey was not yet ended, but its meaning had already bloomed. The strength of love, the patience of the sea, and the quiet truth that no distance is too vast for faith to cross. As evening fell, the wind shifted once more. It carried the faint echo of voices from the far shore, the chants of those still building, still believing. Rama listened, eyes half closed, and felt peace settle within him. The bridge was complete, not only across the water, but within his heart. The dawn after their crossing broke soft and fragrant, wrapped in mist that shimmered like breath upon glass. On the island of Lanka, the forests awoke in slow murmurs, leaves trembling under the weight of dew. The air was rich with birdsong and the faint perfume of unseen flowers. Rama stood at the edge of a high ridge. The sea spread wide behind him, the land of trial and promise before. His heart was steady now, his purpose clear but peaceful, as though he walked not toward battle, but toward reunion. Beside him, Hanuman crouched, his tail coiled neatly, his eyes bright with devotion. The wind moved gently through his fur, whispering the stories of distant realms. "The air is restless," he said softly. "It carries both love and sorrow." Rama smiled. "The air carries your father's voice, Hanuman. Let it guide us." Hanuman bowed his head. "I hear it always," he replied. "It tells me that every breath is an offering. Even the smallest act of service becomes prayer when done with love." The morning sun rose higher, casting long shadows through the palms. Rama's army moved quietly below, their chants blending with the sigh of the sea. The day ahead would bring confrontation, but Rama wished no glory, only restoration. He turned to Hanuman. "You have walked farther than any wind. Tell me, what do you truly seek?" Hanuman's gaze turned toward the horizon, where the mists still lingered. "I seek nothing for myself," he said. "My heart beats for you, my lord, and for the truth you carry. I have seen the worlds from sky to sea, yet none are brighter than the light of devotion." "Still," Rama said gently, "even the wind must rest." Hanuman smiled. "Then let me rest in your service." Together, they descended toward the forest that bordered the great citadel. The ground was soft, covered in fallen blossoms. Streams wound through the trees, their waters cool and clear. The sound of drums came faintly from beyond the hills, the rhythm of the city waking. As they walked, Rama noticed how Hanuman's steps left no mark upon the earth. "You move as though the world bears you gladly," he said. "It does," Hanuman replied. "When one carries only love, the ground becomes light beneath their feet." They came upon a grove where sunlight poured through an opening in the canopy. The air shimmered with motes of gold. Rama paused, sensing peace so deep it seemed the forest itself was holding its breath. Hanuman knelt at his side and whispered, "This is a place of remembering. Here, even the wind slows to listen." Rama closed his eyes. "Then let us listen too." The wind shifted, carrying voices not loud but clear, as though sung by unseen beings. It was a melody without words, full of tenderness and longing. Hanuman's eyes softened. "It is the song of those who serve without asking," he said. "When hearts move in harmony, the air itself sings." The sound deepened, weaving around them. Rama felt something inside him loosen, a grief he had carried so long it had almost become part of his breath. The melody lifted it away, gently, like a tide drawing back the shore. When the last note faded, the forest sighed, and even the leaves seemed brighter. He turned to Hanuman. "You have given me more than words can hold. You are the bridge between strength and humility." Hanuman looked down, embarrassed by praise. "I am only your shadow," he said softly. Rama touched his shoulder. "No, my friend, you are my reflection." They continued through the grove until they reached a clearing where the ground sloped toward a river. Its surface was still, mirroring the sky. Rama sat upon a stone, his thoughts drifting like leaves on the water. Hanuman stood beside him, quiet and alert. At last Rama spoke. "Tell me, Hanuman, when you leapt across the ocean to find Sita, what did you feel?" Hanuman thought for a long moment before answering. "I felt the fear of the world, and the love that dissolves it. For a moment, I was neither body nor spirit, only devotion in motion. I did not fly, I was carried." Rama nodded slowly. "Faith made wings of your heart." "Yes," Hanuman said, "and love made them strong." The afternoon passed gently. Bees hummed among the flowers, and the river murmured soft and low. When the sun began to descend, turning the sky amber, Rama rose. "Tomorrow the world will change again," he said. "But tonight we will rest in this peace." Hanuman bowed and gathered wood for a small fire. As evening fell, its light flickered across their faces. Warm and calm, the sounds of the forest deepened. The chirp of crickets, the call of night birds, the sighing of distant waves. The air itself seemed to hum with quiet anticipation. Rama looked into the flames. Do you ever tire of this service, Hanuman? Of carrying the burdens of others? Hanuman's smile was gentle. Service is not burden, my lord. It is release. Each act of love unbinds me from myself. Then you are freer than any king, Rama said. Hanuman's gaze turned toward the fire. Freedom without love is only wind without direction. They sat in silence, the fire crackling softly. Stars appeared above the treetops, one by one, until the sky was full of quiet light. Rama felt the stillness settle deep within him. Around them, the world seemed to exhale. Hanuman began to sing then, not words of power, but a lullaby, slow and low, filled with warmth. His voice moved like a breeze through the trees, carrying peace in its rhythm. The song told no story, yet it held every story within it. The longing of rivers, the patience of mountains, the hope of the sea. Rama listened, his eyes closing. The music entered his heart like light through open doors. When it ended, he spoke without opening his eyes. When the world forgets me, Hanuman, let it remember your song. The world will not forget you, Hanuman said softly. It will remember your kindness in every sunrise, your courage in every tide. And you, Rama asked. I will remember the silence between your words, Hanuman said. That is where truth lives. The fire burned low. The moon rose high above the trees, casting silver upon the river. Rama lay down upon the grass, his head pillowed on his arm. The scent of blossoms filled the air. Hanuman sat beside him, watchful but serene. The wind moved through the grove in long, slow breaths, as if echoing their rest. In that stillness, all things seemed united, the king and the servant, the wind and the earth, the song and the silence after. When the first light of morning touched the horizon, Hanuman whispered a prayer to the rising sun. May love outlast all battles, and may devotion be the bridge between every heart. Rama stirred, his eyes opening to the dawn. Your prayer has already been answered, he said, smiling. And together, they rose to meet the new day, the forest glowing gold around them, the river whispering blessings at their feet. The sky over Lanka was pale and tender, washed clean by the night's soft rain. The first rays of dawn stretched over the horizon, brushing the palm tops and gilding the edges of the distant mountains. Rama stood upon a high ridge once more, his cloak rippling in the morning breeze. Before him, the land awakened. Streams glittered through the forest, birds stirred from their nests, and the scent of wet earth rose to meet the sun. Hanuman was beside him, silent, his gaze fixed upon the faint columns of smoke that rose from the far city. Between them and the towers of Lanka lay the final stretch of journey, quiet now, the air holding its breath after many storms. The long struggle had ended the day before, not in flame and fury, but in a calm surrender of pride to grace. Ravana's crown lay in the dust, the echo of battle carried away by wind. Now, the island waited for healing. Rama's heart was heavy, yet serene. He felt no triumph, only reverence. So much sorrow, he said softly. Even victory carries its own grief. Hanuman bowed his head. The sea forgets the storm, my lord, but it never forgets the rain. The world will remember peace more than pain. They began to walk down the slope. The grass was wet, shining like woven jade beneath their feet. Rama's steps were slow. His thoughts wandered between memory and longing. Somewhere within the city, Sita waited, a light he had carried in his heart through exile, hardship and silence. And now, though the path to her was clear, he felt the weight of the moment pressing gently upon him. What would he say? What could he say, after so long apart? Hanuman sensed his quiet turmoil. Love needs no words, he said. When light returns after night, it does not explain itself. Rama smiled faintly. You speak as one wiser than gods. I speak as one who listens to the wind, Hanuman replied, and the wind listens to everything. They reached the edge of the forest where the path widened into a field of tall reeds. The air shimmered faintly, carrying the scent of sandalwood and river water. There, near the curve of a small stream, they found Sita waiting. She stood in the morning light, her form reflected in the water beside her. The years of separation had not dimmed her grace. Her eyes were calm, luminous as the moon. When she saw Rama, she bowed her head, and time itself seemed to pause. He stepped forward slowly. The air thickened with the scent of flowers blooming in sudden profusion, as though the earth itself had been waiting for this moment. Sita, he said, his voice trembling like the first note of a long-forgotten song. She lifted her gaze. You have crossed oceans for me, she said, but the distance between hearts was never so wide. Rama stopped before her. Every step I took was toward this moment, he whispered, even when I did not know it. They stood in silence, their reflections touching in the water. The sunlight deepened, spreading gold through the reeds. Hanuman watched from a distance, his eyes warm with quiet joy. The wind that moved through the field carried no sound but the rhythm of their breathing, the sound of two hearts remembering. After a while, Rama spoke again. The world called me king, he said, but without you, I was only shadow. Sita's smile was soft as rain, and without your light, I was only echo. They clasped hands. The air shimmered, and for a heartbeat the river seemed to glow from within. Around them, petals fell from unseen trees, drifting through the sunlight like gentle snow. Hanuman bowed his head, and even the forest seemed to bend closer, as if bearing witness. When they turned back toward the shore, the sky was bright and clear. The bridge that crossed the sea still shone faintly in the distance, its stones glimmering beneath the sun. Rama paused to look upon it, his heart swelling with gratitude. Faith built that path, he said quietly, and love carried us across. Hanuman smiled. Faith builds many bridges, but love keeps them standing when the tide rises. As the day wore on, the three of them made their way to the cliffs overlooking the ocean. From there they could see the waters stretching endlessly, calm and blue. The wind was gentle now, moving through their hair, filling the air with the sound of distant waves. Rama turned to Hanuman. The world will remember your strength, he said, but I will remember your gentleness. Hanuman knelt. My lord, I have only served if the world finds gentleness in me. It is because I learned it from your heart. Rama placed a hand upon his head. You are more than servant or friend. You are the breath of devotion itself. Hanuman closed his eyes. Then may I be your breath forever. The sun began to lower toward the horizon, and the sea caught its fire. The sky turned to rose and gold, and the bridge of stones shone like a ribbon of light between worlds. Sita stood beside Rama, her face radiant in the fading glow. Together they watched the waves roll toward the shore, each one carrying the sound of homecoming. The sea is calm again, Sita said. It reflects what we give it, Rama replied. Even oceans can learn peace. The wind stirred the hem of her sari, and the scent of jasmine filled the air. Hanuman stepped back, letting them stand together. As the last light of day faded into silver, the sky deepened to twilight, the first stars appearing one by one. When night fell, they built a small fire by the cliff's edge. Its flame was steady, its warmth gentle. The three of them sat together in the quiet, saying little. The sea whispered below, endless and patient. After a while, Rama spoke, his voice low. The battles are over, but the true journey never ends, does it? Hanuman looked toward the stars. No journey ends, he said. It only changes shape. What begins in longing ends in remembrance. Sita smiled faintly. And remembrance is another name for love. Rama looked at her, his eyes filled with the reflection of the fire. Then love is what will outlast even the gods. The night grew deeper, wrapping them in its tender quiet. The waves rolled softly against the rocks, marking the rhythm of eternity. In that stillness, no sound of sorrow remained, only peace, vast and breathing. When at last the fire burned low, Rama turned to Hanuman. "You have been my strength, my guide, my friend. What gift can I give you?" Hanuman bowed low. "Grant me only this, that wherever your name is spoken, my name may follow, not for honor, but so I may forever serve your light." Rama touched his hand to his heart. Then, so it shall be. The wind stirred again, carrying the promise into the night. The stars brightened, the sea glimmered, and somewhere far beyond the horizon, a soft dawn was already forming. A dawn that would rise not for kings or gods, but for love itself. And when morning came, the world was renewed. The waves were clear as glass, the sky vast as forgiveness. The bridge of stone shimmered faintly, its lines stretching to infinity. Rama, Sita, and Hanuman stood once more upon the shore, their figures outlined in the sun's first light. The wind carried the fragrance of distant blossoms and the whisper of 1,000 prayers. "Look," Sita said, her voice soft with wonder. "Even the ocean smiles." And as they watched, the water caught the sunlight and shimmered like living gold. An endless reflection of love returned to the world. Evening fell soft over Troy, the city's towers and ramparts touched by fading gold. The walls, long battered by war and siege, stood silent sentinels to grief and hope alike. Within them, the people moved with quiet steps, mothers, children, soldiers, each wrapped in a sorrow born of years. On the battlements, Hector stood, his armor dull with dust, his gaze cast across the plain where enemies waited. He radiated calm resolve, though his heart held the weight of many farewells. Below him, beyond the gates, his wife Andromache waited. In her arms, she held their son, little Astyanax, eyes wide and fearful. The night air trembled between them. She reached out to him, her voice gentle in the hush. "Hector, do not go," she said. "Stay with me, stay with our child. The walls cannot hold your absence." But he knelt, removing his helmet to show his face, as though to protect the child from fear. "My love," he whispered, "the city needs me. If I do not stand, the walls will fall, and all we hold dear will vanish." He stretched his hand, but the child flinched at the plume of his crest. Gently, Hector lifted it and set it aside, then held his son close, careful not to crush him with the weight of war's memory. He smoothed his hair, kissed his brow, and whispered a silent prayer. Andromache's tears glimmered, glinting like stars in the dim torchlight. "If you fall," she said softly, "then do not bind my heart with silence." He gazed into her eyes, full of unspoken fear, full of love. "I do not go to glory," he said, "but because silence is worse." He rose, lifting his shield and sword, and offered her a final bow. She turned away, her shoulders trembling, but her face held strength, born of sorrow. The child clutched her skirts, and they vanished through the gate as Hector mounted. At the gates his comrades gathered, Trojan warriors, allies, men and youth, whose eyes were drawn upward when he passed. They raised no cheer, only bowed their heads. The walls echoed with memory, the echo of shields, the names spoken in grief, the promise of defense. Hector touched the stones with his gauntlet, as though drawing strength from the city itself. Inside Troy's gates, the streets lay quiet. Statues and altars glowed faintly under torches. Priests moved with slow steps, offering prayers. Mothers hummed lullabies to children too young to understand war. The scent of olive oil and incense softened the air. Hector passed them all in silence. He walked, not as conqueror, but as guardian. Over the ramparts, the night wind whispered. Distant hills dimmed into shadow. The plain below lay open, lanes of darkness edged with fire. In that hush, Hector felt the singular weight of choice. To go was to risk all. To stay was to fail those he loved. He exhaled slowly, steadying his heart. He walked down the stairs, past the inner gates, past the faces of those awaiting dawn's reckoning. He passed the house of Priam and Hecuba, their hands clasped in silent prayer. He passed the oracles and altars. His steps echoed as if the city itself were breathing, guiding him onward. Then he spoke, voice clear, carried across stone and air. Trojans, sons of gods and dust, I go beyond these walls as your defender, but I do not go alone. Every breath within these stones, every prayer from your hearths goes with me. His shield glinted faintly, his spear poised. If I fall, let my death be as part of the wall, stone among stones, held by memory. Outside the walls, the plain stretched vast and still. Torches glowed at the Trojan lines. The Greek ships glinted at the horizon. The sky above was heavy with stars, the clouds drifting like smoke. Hector paused, looking back at Troy, its rooftops, its hearthlights, the walls that held so much weight. At dawn, a trumpet sounded. The first light spilled across the foam of war's edges. Hector raised his shield, held his spear high, and walked forward. No song behind him, no triumph ahead, only the long farewell and the armor of duty. He knelt and touched the ground. He whispered to the air, "May the gods remember you, even when I cannot." Rising, he faced the plain, the sorrow in his heart folded into resolve. Within the palace, Andromache sat on the cold floor of the chamber where they had once shared quiet meals and whispered dreams. Her son lay asleep beside her, his breath warm, his face peaceful, in dreams untouched by grief. She combed his hair with her fingers and did not weep. The time for tears had passed. Now, her heart was filled with songs, low, wordless melodies that her mother had once sung to her, and she had sung to her son. Songs that told no story, yet carried the shape of love. The city watched, breath held. The walls stood silent, carrying every memory. And in that moment, far beyond the stone, the first threads of fate began to tug. The morning after Hector's passing rose in silence. The sun climbed slow and soft over Troy, casting long shadows against the high stone walls. In the streets the people did not speak, but their hands moved with purpose, sweeping thresholds, laying garlands of olive and laurel at doorways, lighting small clay lamps in memory. It was as though the entire city breathed in unison, mourning not only a prince, but something older, something that had held them all together. Outside, the people gathered in the square. At the center stood an altar of smooth white stone, draped in linen, adorned with woven branches and lamps that flickered in the early breeze. Priam, the aged king, walked with slow dignity, supported by Hecuba and the priests. His steps were careful, yet his eyes were clear, eyes that had seen sons buried, temples burned, peace lost and returned again. He reached the altar and placed upon it a single stone from the gates of Troy. "May this hold the weight of my son," he said softly. "May it carry the name of the one who stood between us and the tide." The city knelt with him. In the fields beyond, the Greeks prepared their rites too. Achilles, who had brought down the Prince of Troy, sat alone beneath a tent open to the sky. Before him, Hector's armor lay folded, no longer shining. The air around him was still, the sea beyond the dunes pale and slow. Patroclus had long passed, and the grief of that loss had hardened into something quiet. Yet now, with Hector gone, another kind of silence had entered him. Not the silence of vengeance, but of understanding. That evening, the funeral procession began. He rose without words, carried the armor to the edge of the sea, and washed it in the tide. The salt stung his hands, and the water pulled gently at his feet. He did not resist. Instead, he whispered, "You fought for what you loved. So did I. Let the gods decide who was noble." The sea made no reply, only wrapped the armor in its glimmering light. In Troy, the people lined the walls, flowers covered the gates. The sun dipped low, painting the city in gold and red. The bier of Hector was carried through the streets by his comrades, draped in soft cloth, his sword laid upon his chest. Music rose, not a march of war, but a hymn of peace, of courage lived and ended. The rhythm was slow, the melody deep. It swelled and fell like waves. In the fields beyond, Achilles watched from a distance. He did not approach the city, but he bowed his head when the music reached him. "Let his name be sung," he said to the wind. "Let my name fall silent beside it." That night, the stars were brighter than before. The people of Troy gathered around the pyre as it was lit. The flames rose slowly, wrapping Hector's form in light. The smoke drifted upward, gentle and pale, curling into the sky like a final breath. No one spoke. The fire itself told the story. Andromache followed, her child in her arms, her steps steady. She did not look down. The sky above held her gaze. Behind her walked Priam and Hecuba, the city's elders, the children, the workers, all united by the thread of farewell. The bells of the temples rang once long and clear, then fell silent. At dawn, the city awoke quietly. The priests carried the ashes to the sacred grove beyond the river. There, beneath a wide tamarisk tree, they placed the urn upon a stone. Around it, they planted flowers and herbs, thyme for courage, rosemary for memory, lavender for peace. The air filled with their scent. When it ended, only embers remained. Priam stood beside the grave. He touched the urn gently and said, "May he guard us still. May his spirit walk the walls." The people echoed his words in silence, each heart adding its own prayer. That evening, children played once more in the streets. Lamps were lit in windows. Food was shared without words. Music rose again, but softer, more like a lullaby. The city was healing, moment by moment, breath by breath. Then the king turned to the people. "We have known sorrow, but sorrow too is sacred. Let us now rebuild, not walls but trust." He stepped down from the stone and walked among them, placing his hands on their shoulders, not as king but as father, far off in his tent. Achilles laid down his armor and stepped outside. The sky was dark and calm, the sea whispering nearby. He looked toward Troy and felt something inside him release. He whispered the name of the man he had once called enemy and let it dissolve into the stars. "I see you," he said. "I remember." And in that moment the wind turned warm, the ocean hushed, and the gods themselves listened. Not to the clash of swords or the cries of battle, but to something far quieter, the sound of a city learning to sing again.